Welcome to the Horror Hangout podcast, where film fans watch the best and worst horror movies of all time and talk about them. My name is Ben Errington, and today I'm joined by a very special guest. Vannah Taylor is a queer horror fan and academic, an MA candidate writing her thesis on rape revenge, and a co-host of Tale of Two Sisters and the Carnal Extremities podcasts. Welcome to the show, Vannah. Hello.
Hello.
Hello there. How's it going?
It's good. I'm very excited. I love talking. I love being a guest on other people's podcasts, so I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, it's good. All the pressure's off, right? When you're on a different
Yeah.
podcast.
I don't have to edit.
You can just finally relax. Yeah, so thanks so much for joining us. I have listened to a Tale of Two Sisters podcast before, and even listened to it today just to get in the mood. So you guys have been going for only a few episodes so far, is that correct?
Yeah, we started releasing episodes regularly in February. It's been a little hard because my thesis is due by the end of this month. So I keep trying to
Oh wow,
fit
okay.
in recording with my sister in between writing my thesis, which I should have just held off until April.
And you are
I
actually sisters as well, right?
Yes, we are. Yeah, she's my little sister.
Oh wow,
Uh
okay, that's cool.
yeah, a lot of people ask us, like, apparently she said a lot of people ask her, like, are you guys actually sisters or is that just a bit? And I'm
Yeah,
like,
I mean, it's
that's
just
why
one of
we
those things. You kind of thought, are you just saying it like in a you guys are like soul sisters type of thing? But no, you're actually related. Okay, that's cool. It's good that you guys have got like similar tastes, I guess. Would you say similar tastes or like the exact same tastes?
I would say similar. We do disagree on a lot of uh
Mm-hmm.
things. Like, she does not like David Lynch at all, and like
Oh
I
right,
just got a
okay.
blue velvet tattoo. I love David Lynch.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
She's not like a Rob Zombie fan. Like, I love Rob Zombie, but so there's like little things like that, but we
Yeah.
generally have a lot of the same tastes. I like show her a lot of horror movies. That's how we have kind of like, I guess, connected now being adults.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we're no longer like teenagers and stuff that are like angry at each other all the time or something. Um, but our family as a whole, like our whole family, like kind of likes to watch horror movies together. So that's like a fun family activity for us.
It is a fun family activity, definitely. It's something that, can really bond. It's a lovely bonding process as well. How are you finding hosting a podcast with your sister?
It is, it's kind of fun because we kind of already were having those kinds of conversations and analyzing films for fun and things like that. So it's kind of fun to be able to share that. It is challenging just in the way that hosting a podcast is challenging,
Yeah.
making posts. Like, I'm the one who's editing and recording, but also I'm like super busy, so trying to fit like my busy schedule in with her schedule. Um and again, we do also have, like I said, little differences in taste. So coming up with like episode lineups and what things we
Hmm.
want to cover, um we disagree a little bit, not in like a bad way, but just like we have to compromise and things
I
like
am
that.
never talking to you ever again. It's good
Yeah.
though. I think those disagreements are good because me and Andy on this show. Andy's not here, by the way. If you're listening, apologies. He's not extra quiet. He's just not here. I find that because me and Andy have done so many episodes together, our tastes have kind of like shaped in similar ways. So now I feel like we're always rating films like really in a really similar way and enjoying films and not enjoying films the same sort of stuff. So in a way, what I'm not doing, Vanna, is inviting you to have a major disagreement with me on anything. I would never do that. Um, however, I think it is nice sometimes when there are sort of differing opinions. I mean, we've had a couple fairly recently, but still, I think it makes for an interesting listen as well.
Yeah, it's a lot of times it's just maybe a difference in like our initial readings of a film. I think maybe just coming from different backgrounds, because I'm getting my master's in, so uh a lot of my analysis, like that's just how my brain works. It comes from that kind of point of view. And she has acted before, she's directed before,
Oh wow, okay.
like in like more stage productions. So and she's super into cosplay, she's super into costuming and arts and crafts. So like when
Oh
she
wow.
watches movies, she's thinking about a lot of those
Hmm.
kinds of elements. So I think that's, we always have like different things that we like notice or pull from movies. So that's fun.
It feels like you're covering a lot there. It's probably a really good cross section of the
Yeah.
film. And as I always say when we got guests in this podcast, it's nice to have a guest who's somewhat qualified to talk about films. Whereas as me and Andy, and I hate to do this to Andy, but especially when he's not here, kind of just two idiots who, you know, and
Okay.
again,
I'm
like
just gonna
watching a lot of films for the first time. I consider myself an accomplished horror fan, but there's so many things that I'm like, I'm watching this for the first time. For example, both films today, watching for the first time, and someone like that, what you would consider absolute classics of the genre and subgenres, like I've never seen. So I mean, this podcast has helped me see a lot of those films. So yeah.
Yeah, no,
As a,
I am honored that people consider me qualified. I still think of myself as just some idiot watching movies. But I also like admittedly there are so many classics that I haven't seen.
Mm.
Um like I think especially sometimes when there are things that are so fundamental or like so ingrained in popular culture. Sometimes I was just telling my sister this, like sometimes I don't, my brain doesn't think of those movies when I'm like, oh, I should watch something I've never seen before. If there's a movie that like the imagery or there's certain scenes or phrases that are like so ingrained in our popular culture that I don't think of them as something I haven't seen.
Yeah, no,
But yeah,
I totally get that.
yeah,
The
with
amount of
my
times
own
I've
podcast,
gone,
we're kind of
the amount of
like
time, yeah,
she's helping with that. So we'll see.
the amount of times I'm like, I've seen that film, and then I realize I've probably just seen a GIF,
Yeah. Which
and
also
that's kind of
on the opposite end, sometimes I think I haven't seen a movie and then we're watching it and I'm like, wait,
yeah,
I've seen this before.
I get that too. Yeah, definitely. Um, as we often say, horror is the genre that keeps on giving. You'll never ever complete it, even if because so much awesome new stuff coming out all the time. So as I mentioned previously when we started recording, I saw your tweet, which was about talking about Last House on the Left, talking about I Spit on Your Grave, and that you kind of wanted to talk about those films a little bit more. And as we'd covered The Last House on the Left fairly recently, I thought it was perfect to invite you onto the show to discuss that I Spit on Your Grave. Double bill, I guess, of sorts. You got a lot of response to that tweet as well, didn't you?
I was actually pretty surprised, I guess. I don't know. I think I have recently had like an uptick in followers just because of coming out with a couple podcasts and just I don't like using the word networking, but just becoming more acquainted with other people in the horror community and then maybe that spreads,
Mm-hmm.
the way the algorithm works, people find. But yeah, a lot of people had a lot of thoughts. Again, still more about the originals than the remakes. So
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to say I didn't accomplish anything with that tweet, but yeah, I don't know. I think it's still interesting to me that there is a gap in the conversation, which in a way is encouraging when you're trying to write a thesis and
Yeah.
present original research, quote unquote, about something. So like that's kind of cool. But yeah, I have some other horror friends, like Ariel, or like Ari Hellraiser. You might know her on Twitter as she's currently in the
Oh
process
yeah.
of a book about torture porn. So
Oh,
uh
okay.
so I think in the future, once she's maybe done with that book and I've finished my thesis, it'll be interesting if we have similar readings like
Yeah,
coming
a similar
from different.
outcome, I guess. Yeah.
Like, yeah. Yeah. It was
How do you,
interesting.
how Yeah, sounds definitely sounds interesting. How do you feel about torture porn as a genre, especially like the resurgence of it, I guess, in the mid 2000s? Because me personally, it was again, I've already mentioned that I've never seen I Spit on Your Grave before. It's always one of those subgenres that I've not purposely stayed away from, but I think in terms of the subject matter, it's never been something that I've always found particularly something I was that interested in terms of. I think I've always gravitated towards horror in the simplest way possible. It's the stuff that scares me, and maybe like in a way I'm separating like the physical body horror from like stuff that actually scares me. Um, that's maybe my reading on it, but yeah, I just wonder what your relationship was with the resurgence of it.
Um, it's interesting. I love torture porn, or at least like what's considered quote unquote torture porn. Like that term being popularized after Saw and like Hostel. I definitely
Mhm.
really like Saw is one of my favorite movies. I have Billy from Saw tattooed on me.
Wow,
Um, I
awesome.
yeah, I like that kind of stuff. I um again because I have always just come to film with a like analytic lens of about like what's happening in society at the time. Like I've always found torture porn interesting because it's um at least what I'm exploring in my thesis is that it's, a direct response to American nihilism and post 9/11. Um, I think it has
Mm,
a lot to say about humanity. A lot of people think it's just like violence for the sake of violence, but in
mm,
my opinion, along the same lines as the argument, like style is substance, I would also argue that like violence is substance, and that there's always an uptick in extremely violent films when the society at the time is trying to repress its um like the actual violence that's occurring. So like with Last House on Your Left, that was very much a response to the Vietnam War and the fact that
mhm.
that was televised war. And so of course when we are like you know, Abu Ghraib and like American soldiers torturing war
Mm.
prisoners, torture itself became a concept that was like part of public consciousness.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people were like, well, where do I stand? Like, as far as humanity, like, I think, you already talked about like you guys did Last House on the Left. Like in the remake, very specifically, the dad makes comments like, we have to be ready to do anything. So I think a lot of what's
Mm.
happening is the conversation of like when we question what a nation will do when it has been attacked or perceived to have been attacked, uh it's like we get films that explore what like the family will do when it's the family has been
Yeah.
perceived attacked, which is like why it's interesting too that like rape revenge itself like snuck its way into that
Mhm.
little resurgence. I just
Yeah,
recently
because
read
wasn't.
called it neo exploitation, like because there's all these like there's like the Splat Pack and there's like Rob Zombie and Eli Roth, and they're
Mhm.
like these dudes who all grew up watching 70s exploitation, so that's
Got it.
they consider torture porn to be a like neo exploitation movement, which
I
I
see.
think is fun. Like they're just
Yeah.
making movies they want to make.
Because Last House on the Left and Spit on Your Grave remake 2010, is that correct? They
Yeah,
both
I think
2010?
Because Last House on the Left, I think, had a like a festival run a little bit. So I think Last House was like technically 2009 and then released later in 2009. And only like maybe a less than a
Okay.
year later, I
Still
Spit
kind of
on Your
weird that
yeah.
still kind of weird that there was that those films were decided to be remade so close together. Um,
Yeah. That's
and
what I
what
find.
6 years between the originals as well. So yeah,
Yeah.
so it must have been like filmmakers who'd kind of grown up watching those films that decided that they were sort of in need of a remake. Um,
Mhm.
so obviously the original title for I Spit on Your Grave was Day of the Woman. Now, I I did send a tweet out, which when I was watching both of these films, where I just quoted Day of the Woman before I was watching them. And I did have a little bit of a response where someone was saying, "Oh, I don't think you should call either of the you should associate that phrase to either of those films." And I said, "Well, that was the original title, it's nothing to do with
Yeah.
me. I'm not just deciding to say that." Um, do we know the reason why it was changed to I Spit on Your Grave? Because they have obviously it conjures very, very different ideas, doesn't it?
Yeah, so yeah, I love the original title, and that's actually, I think, when I quote tweeted that tweet, someone commented on my tweet saying like that they
That's right,
love
isn't it?
that
Yeah.
title. And
Okay.
yeah, so it's called Day of the Woman. You know, after the film had garnered lots of controversy, Meir Zarchi did an interview where he explained why he made the film, and I think that explains why he called it Day of the Woman.
Hmm.
Um, he had personally tried to distribute it to like independent cinemas in 1978, but then in 1980, I forgot his name, but a guy with a distribution company wanted to buy the rights to distribute it, and that's when it actually got a cinema release, and that's when like Roger Ebert gave his famous
Oh
review
yeah,
for
of course.
but the caveat of purchasing the rights to distribute it meant that he could change the title to whatever he wanted to change it to.
Jerry
And
Gross organization. Does that sound right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So, and he changed it to I Spit on Your Grave, which is the title of another film that already came out, like maybe within a decade prior, that also features a controversial rape scene. And I think his purpose was to garner attention to the film because of the controversy that had followed
Hmm.
the film of the same name. And that's actually like the name change is actually something that's kind of important to uh, some of the arguments in my thesis, because a lot of people think of exploitation as being that like like trauma porn is like
Hmm.
another way, like that it's exploiting violence,
Yeah.
like that the subject matter is exploitative. But in my research, in like researching the meaning of exploitation as film historians see it, is that exploitation typically actually refers to when marketing exploits the horror of a film
Okay.
in order to sell tickets. Like, we dare you to come see this movie. Like, everyone's throwing up and passing out. Like that is what is exploitative. Like the
Yeah. But
the
that's still
poster.
happening,
Yeah,
isn't it?
the famous poster, of I Spit on Your Grave with like Demi Moore's butt on the cover, and then telling you like I dare you to come watch this movie, and also changing it to a title that is provocative rather than highlighting.
So is
Um,
that isn't the actress on the poster? That isn't the actress from
no.
the film. I didn't know.
Yeah,
I didn't know
so
that either.
yeah, I'm not sure how, like I think Demi Moore had like confessed or admitted to posing for that
Oh,
shoot, but I
okay.
don't know if like there's
Confessed.
receipts of that anywhere. But yeah, she doesn't wear that outfit ever. That's definitely not Jenna. That's not Camille Keaton's.
No, I mean,
She's tiny little thing. So
Yeah.
yeah, so those elements to me are what like are quote unquote exploiting the film's content to
Hmm.
like sell tickets. And to me, I think um that sets the stage for how someone will consume the film. So I think moviegoers in 1980 when it got its wide release were like, "Oh, this movie's like daring us to see it, and it's called I
Mm.
Spit on Your Grave, and there's some chick's butt on the cover." Like, so I think moviegoers like that framed their understanding of like why the movie might have been made. And so it wasn't until like the mid 80s when Meir
Yeah.
Zarchi talked about his experience and things like that. So I think that's why so many people had so many like explosive
Mm.
reactions to it and like calling it like misogynistic and
Mm.
things like that, which so I think it did a disservice to the film. I think I Spit on Your Grave is like that's such a like a metal name. Like it's so hardcore, but like but Day of the Woman, as far as like how I feel when I'm watching the
Yeah.
original
Okay.
is like such a better title to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're both pretty good titles. Also, the tagline is I guess in terms of exploitative, we're trying to dare people to go and see the film. So it says this woman has just cut, chopped, broken, and burned five men beyond recognition, but no jury in America would ever convict her. So that already you're thinking, well, why? Why wouldn't they convict her? What the hell is happening in this film?
Yeah, like
And it
why? Yeah,
obviously,
you're like, why did she do that to them? And why wouldn't we convict her? Like, I think taglines like that to me also like spoil the film because I'm like, I don't know, like
yeah,
I don't know. I think it's like
yeah, I
telling
know what you
you
mean.
that you're gonna get chopped up.
Is yeah, because it's one of those. I guess in terms of like rape revenge films, you know it's essentially it is a film of two halves, isn't it? You know something terrible is going to happen in the first half, and something will happen. It's bittersweet. I always find. I mean,
Mhm.
because it's like again, we will make these comparisons when we get into the film, especially with the original, where I think just it does evoke such extreme reactions where you're like, oh, kill him worse than that.
Yeah.
Fuck them up. And then I think in the 2010 version, like it sort of hits the proverbial nail on the head where you're like, yeah, that's exactly what they deserve. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, in the original, you're just a bit like, oh, speedboat to the head. That's
You
I
got off.
imagine that's I imagine that's quick and painless.
Yeah.
Not that I've ever been in a speedboat accident. Okay, right. We've obviously covered a few bits already, but I will just jump into the standard bits and bobs that we need to cover on the show. Otherwise, regular listeners are going to be like, what's going on? Don't want to confuse everybody. So, got some horror news for us to discuss very briefly. So, there's a trailer for a movie called The Blackening, which spoofs slasher tropes from a black perspective. Don't know if you saw the trailer for that this week.
I've not seen it, but I've been pretty MIA because of
Oh, I see. I see.
writing.
That's okay. So if
But
this is all brand new. So I'm going through like a not watching trailers hiatus, I guess. Watching trailers hiatus. So I've not seen the trailer. However, it's coming out in June and it's coming out on Juneteenth weekend as well. So Lionsgate have released it. The tagline is wait, where's the tagline? I had the tagline. So it was basically like, we can't all die first. So obviously, it seems like it's leaning heavily into a lot of the cliches surrounding slasher movies and obviously black characters. It looks like a mix of Saw. It's got some meta stuff in there. So people are saying it's a bit like Scream, Cabin in the Woods with some meta stuff. Horror genre through an all black lens. So it is an all black cast as well. And yeah, it's coming out in June 2023. So that looks very interesting. If you've not seen the trailer, probably go and check it out. Not that I'm going to do that, but I'll definitely be watching it. And apparently it's been one of the runaway hits of the Toronto International Film Festival. It's been getting good reviews. So yeah, there we go. Also, another piece of news: the Poltergeist franchise is apparently going to be revived by Amazon. This has always been one of those franchises where I'm a bit like, why don't we get more Poltergeist? Because I know we had that remake the remake that maybe we shouldn't mention. I don't know. Did you see that,
I
Vannah?
did not see the remake. I
It
no.
it was really weird. It had like Sam Rockwell in it, who I would consider not a horror film guy. Like I don't think he's definitely not been in anything that resembles a horror film, right?
I don't think so.
Never. This was 2010 as well, where I feel like what was going on? Remakes were going absolutely
Um,
crazy.
Lots of
Um,
remakes.
lay off the remake. It wasn't good. However, Amazon. So I don't know whether this is going to be a TV series. So apparently, because of it wasn't 2010. I don't know why I've imagined it was 2010. It was 2015, the Poltergeist remake. So apparently, Amazon have plans for Poltergeist, naming the franchise as one of several MGM properties that is looking to prioritize. Um, yeah, this could be interesting. So it's very complicated by the fact that Spielberg would likely need to be involved. Just cut him loose, I reckon. Just cut Stevie loose. He's not. He's busy. He's got other things on. I don't know if he cares about Poltergeist, which apparently which he did or didn't direct.
Yeah.
Um, well.
Quite the
Um,
debate.
this could be cool though. I feel like it's one of those franchises that probably gets overlooked a little bit in terms of. I think the sequels aren't totally terrible.
I am a chronic sequel avoider.
Okay,
It's not
okay.
always intentional. I just like if I have a movie that I really like, sometimes I don't like. I almost
Hmm.
like purposefully avoid
Yeah.
sequels. Not in this case. Wasn't like purposeful, but sometimes I just like don't really. I love like a movie that's just a movie, and
Yeah.
I purposefully don't really see the need to like continue using the same property, like add in some digits at the end of it, like
Yeah.
but
Totally.
but I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I ever really even like thought about like when
Hmm.
I watch Poltergeist and I'm just like, yeah, that was fun. And I'm never like, oh, I should see what happened in the next
Oh, more
one.
of that. Oh, more of that. I'm kind of the same where I've avoided like sequels, especially from like horror franchises from like the 80s and 90s. But I think in the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I've had a bit of a resurgence where I've gone, I should really watch some of these sequels just to see, because I'm quite fascinated by by sequels where you're like, does this need to exist? How are they going to like will it into existence, especially when characters are dead? A perfect example, Return of the Living Dead, where in the sequel, Return of the Living Dead 2, two characters reappear who died in the first one with no explanation. Nobody says this is a prequel. This is taking place in a different timeline. Two characters that died are just alive. So I don't know. I'm kind of fascinated by how they come about and how willing people are to just kind of forget everything that came before certain sequels. Um, yeah, I do find it really fascinating. But in terms of I Spit on Your Grave, I didn't even know that there was a sequel to the 2010 film, which obviously we're going to chat about. Um, two sequels to it as well. So especially when some of them are did either of them get like theatrical releases?
I don't think so. If I remember correctly, I think they were like straight to video kind of things. The first one didn't particularly get a lot of praise, like the remake. Like I don't think
Mm,
people enjoyed it, so at least enough for me to have even thought that they would fund a sequel. So I don't imagine it got a release. I tried
yeah,
looking at the box office for the remake and it was like a very small
yeah.
amount. Yeah, I don't know why they
So
made
so
sequels,
I think
but
the budget was $2 million and it made like 500,000 back, which isn't like absolutely terrible. The remake has got one of the weirdest castings ever as well, right? Do you know? Do you know what I mean in the remake?
I yeah, I had seen it before like a long time ago and I had only just rewatched it particularly
Yeah.
to take notes and write my chapter about it and I was like is that Damien from Mean Girls. Oh my!
Exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
I have
Damien from Mean
no
Girls,
recollection of him being in it. I
as in, is it you go Glen Coco? Is that is that his
yeah.
famous quote? I
Uh,
so I was like, I recognize that guy, but I don't know what from. And it took, I reckon it took almost the entire duration until he was getting his eyeballs pecked out. I was like, there is no way that that is the same guy, because it couldn't be two more polar opposite characters, right? Just
yeah.
horrific, horrible, toxic masculinity versus that I spit on your grave. No, I'm just, no,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
joking. I'm joking. Wrong way around. Um, it was crazy. I couldn't believe it. But still, at least that goes to show that he never got typecast, because quite a popular role.
Maybe that was his like attempt to come out. You
Okay.
know, whenever like Disney and Nickelodeon stars like do like they
Yeah.
do the breakers, you know, and then they're trying to like get out. uh
What did you say? Did you say
Spring
Spring
Breakers,
Breakers?
you know, because it has like
That's the first thing I thought of as well. Yeah, because it's
yeah,
got
there's like
Selena
there's always
Gomez, isn't it?
the movie that a Disney or Nickelodeon star tries to do to
Yeah.
like
It's basically the equivalent of Christina Aguilera's Dirty video,
yeah.
where she's just like, "What's that? I'm a Disney Mickey Mouse Club girl. Wait till you see the chaps." Okay,
Yeah.
that's it. Okay, I mean, I've got one more piece of news that we could just jump. So Nosferatu. Now, the Nosferatu Robert Eggers remake of that movie, I don't think it still hasn't officially cast Willem Dafoe in it. I think that's only a rumor at this stage. But they've just cast Aaron Taylor Johnson in it, and I don't know if he's going to be the main, the titular
Mm.
vampire. But yeah, that's kind of it's good that. Oh wait, no, Willem Dafoe has been confirmed. See, I've seen conflicting things. Willem Dafoe, Bill Skarsgård, Nicholas Hoult, Lily
Oh,
Rose Depp.
oh gosh.
Are you saying yeah? Are you saying yes
So
or no to
exciting.
these
Yeah,
to these ones?
I'm a big Eggers fan. I have a
Okay.
witch behind me, and I have a a lighthouse
Oh my
tattoo.
god, you got a
So
lighthouse. Is that an exclusively horror film focused sleeve?
yeah, and then we're actually gonna start this one. I have a Midsummer one already, and then we're
Oh
actually
my
gonna
god.
tattoo Black Phillip to cover up this guy
You're gonna
right
get
here.
Black Phillip tattooed as well. Oh my
Yeah,
god, this is
but
so
yeah, on
cool.
this arm, it's a I have a couple like this one's like a tarot card. So there's like a couple on here that I got before.
Oh, you've got what's his name from Trick or Treat as well.
Yeah, I
Sam.
have yeah, Sam, I have Jennifer from Jennifer's Body, Sadako
This is
from Vengeance,
awesome.
Michael Myers, I got Billy. This is from Haunted Mansion. This rabbit is for House of a Thousand Corpses, you know, and they're like, run rabbit.
What's the twirly thing on your
Oh
elbow?
yeah, this is
Is that
for
just
Twilight Zone.
okay? Oh my god,
Yeah,
this is
yeah,
so
and
cool.
then the heart is supposed to be like a stand-in for like Tetsuo because it's like a mechanical heart.
This is
Uh,
awesome. We covered Tetsuo like
yeah,
probably
with
a month
Amber,
or so
right?
ago with Amber
Yeah.
as well. Yeah.
And then
So
my blue velvet tattoo. Yeah, Amber is the one who got me to watch Tetsuo, and I obviously loved it. And I have a Tetsuo shirt. I actually have a Tetsuo shirt that I'm gonna send her for her birthday. So
oh my
yeah,
god. Well, hopefully she won't listen to this, or
she
the
knows
surprise will
about
be
it.
ruined.
Forgetting to
She
send it
knows
to her.
about it. Okay, that is
Yeah,
awesome though. I feel
I
like
don't know
I
how to
could.
send mail to the UK, so it's I just gotta take it to the
The
post office.
answers. Just take it to the post office, and it'll cost a lot probably. That's
Yeah.
awesome though. I'm kind of in the process of a horror movie sleeve as well. So I've currently got a Brundlefly, which is pretty
Ooh,
gruesome.
oh, I
That's
love
pretty
it.
tasty. And I mean, I've got a shirt on. I don't want to start derobing, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna. No matter how embarrassing this could potentially be, looking back to it. And I've also. I didn't think we were gonna go this far. And I've got some stuff from The Thing. So some monstrous, horrible. Do you know the part in The Thing where the two faces are fused together?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. I
It's
love
it's
that.
basically it's basically that, but like with loads of extra tentacles and stuff. And then that guy,
I love it.
the spider head.
I love it.
Um,
Yeah, the thing is the first movie I remember watching, actually.
oh wow, okay,
Like
that's an
4 years
interesting
old.
first.
Yeah.
4 years old.
Yep. So my dad is the reason I'm like this. So he showed it to me. He was like, "It's fine. You can watch it. It's
It's
fine. It's a middle night."
it's fine. I was terrified of the VHS cover of the thing. I couldn't even look at that, let alone the film.
Yeah, it
But
was
yeah.
just on. Yeah, it was just on, and it woke me up, and so I came out, and he was like, "Yeah,
I'll have
come
a
sit, come
look.
watch this movie with me." And I'm like, I that looks like a movie that mom would be mad, like if you let me watch it." And he was like, "No, just come sit."
That's fine.
And
It's
then that's when the dog turned into, the dog split
oh
open.
yeah, the poor
So
dog.
that's great memory. So he's the reason I'm like this. I
We've all got to
remember
blame somebody.
every time I show him a movie that traumatizes him.
Oh right, okay, revenge. Uh, okay, that I mean that is it. That is it for news. The next part of the show is what we've been watching. So I guess we could just chat about anything you've watched. It only have to be a couple of examples, maybe from like the last week or so. I'm pretty sure that I've got a couple of things that maybe you've seen. I'm not sure. I think you've seen one of them. Um, so is there anything you've seen in the last 7 days that it could be longer than that? It's your first time on the show.
Um, yeah, well, the last few weeks have been mostly like both Last House on the Left, both I Spit on Your Graves. I watched both Straw Dogs versions. Um,
Yeah, of course. Oh
I
my
went
god, I
to a
completely forgot.
screening of Irreversible. Um, I'm going to another screening of Irreversible tomorrow.
Did you happen to just go and see Irreversible while you were also watching all these films, or was
Yeah.
it just coincidence?
Well, the it came together well because the straight cut is getting a little like
Hmm.
run around some theaters, which is like the film recut to be chronological. Uh
Okay.
so because it's out, the like art house cinema I usually go to is was also showing the original. And I was like, I should go see that on the big screen. And
Hmm.
and it kind of ties in with the movies I've been watching. And then tomorrow I'm gonna go see the straight cut with the co-host of my podcast, Carnal Extremities, and
Oh wow.
guest
Okay.
star Noise doing like the intro and like a Q&A actually. So that's pretty exciting.
Seriously.
Um,
What like
yeah,
in person?
so and then I also watched Secretary for the first time with James Spader.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was that
Secretary.
was like that was my like de-stressing after watching Irreversible.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's what I've been watching. Lots.
Yeah. So, something consensual, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. Sort
Uh.
of.
Yeah. I guess. Oh, well, I say that it's been a long time since I've seen Secretary. Um. I remember going into that thinking it was going to be something completely different. I don't know why, but for some reason somebody told me it was a romantic comedy.
Yeah. Yeah, I
So,
watched it. Yeah, people were kind of talking about it because of Valentine's Day and such. And
hmm,
I had only seen James Spader as Robert California in The Office until
okay.
like last month. I watched Crash, Cronenberg's Crash, and
Yes.
I
Yes.
was like, oh no, oh no. So then I watched Secretary, and then I was like, oh no again.
What
This,
what a pair of roles for like James Spader to be associated with as well, like
yeah,
Secretary and Crash. Considering like obviously, yeah, you said you know him from The Office, but is he's in like a sort of crime drama? What's that thing called? Where he's got a I can't remember, but he's kind of like a detective. I think a lot of people are going to know him from that.
yeah.
What's it called?
My mom was like, well, yeah, of course he's in those roles. He was like, the bad rich popular boy, snooty boy, like grown up. And I was like, what are you talking about? Because she was talking about like when Robert Downey Jr. was young and all that, like because he's in like Pretty in Pink and stuff. And
Yeah.
yeah, so I
In fact,
guess to her that was like, yeah, of course that's what he
mm,
would do. Like, what? Because
mm,
obviously coming from two different generations of his career, but yeah, so that was interesting. That was fun. Watched Crash like the week I got into a car accident, so that was
oh my
also
God. No
interesting.
way.
Yeah.
Not a bad one, I hope. No.
No, no, it was I'm fine. Just I don't have a car now, but
Oh.
That's besides the point. But
And you watched Crash to de-stress after.
yeah,
just to de-stress after
yeah,
that.
I don't know. Yeah.
That was good. Uh, I mean, that is a really interesting load of films to have been watching.
Mhm.
But then again, whatever helps you de-stress, I find sometimes some super extreme, not just obviously these are different extreme types of films, but sometimes really extreme sort of horror movies and films with loads of gore can help you de-stress. They're comforting in that way.
Yeah, I posted my letterboxed like log and some people like commented like, "Are you okay?" Like,
And you're
I
like,
mean, I
never
do you want
better.
to hear the real answer? But no, yeah, I'm okay.
Let's not get into the real answer. I'm
Yeah.
okay. It's fine. Don't worry about me. So my viewing this week hasn't been anywhere near as intense as that. However, I've seen a couple of like new releases that I kind of wanted to see as well. So I saw Cocaine Bear
Mm,
because why not? It was like a lot more of a comedy than I was kind of expecting. From the trailer, I kind of saw okay, it's going to be a comedy. Kind of expected to be a bit darker in terms of comedic stuff, but there is a lot of gore, which I kind of didn't necessarily expect either. Like
interesting.
appendages being ripped off, lots of blood and fret, and there were some good laughs as well. That is definitely a good de-stress film.
Mhm.
90 minutes of just um
Silly.
a bear riled up. Very silly, very, very silly. So I also watched a movie called Unwelcome, which I swear I've seen like the trailer for probably about 2 years ago. One of those, sometimes a film you're just like, why has this not been released yet? And apparently, so it is a fairly new release. And as a concept, do you know anything about this at all?
Mm,
I, this is the weird thing, right? I feel like I don't want to spoil it, but at the same time, I'm pretty sure the poster's a spoiler.
mm,
just just from looking at the poster. So I think it's fairly common knowledge that it's basically killer goblins.
mm.
So yeah. So a couple who live in London have like a traumatic experience and they move to a cottage in Ireland and yeah, various various things lead up to the fact that they need to make these sacrifices, or not sacrifices as such, but like offerings to these little what they call red caps, which I don't actually know if they're actual goblins. They're kind of like just little creepy little fairy people. um I really loved the concept, but execution not good, unfortunately. Took absolutely ages for there to be any sort of reveal in terms of what the creatures were. Just some really badly written characters as well, just people who are just really getting on my nerves. uh
Interesting.
yeah, and I think yeah, but I guess kind of watchable, and like in a way it stars who does it star? It stars that guy who I don't recognize in anything else apart from that Motley Crue movie. Douglas Booth. Douglas
Hmm.
Booth. He was the one who played Nikki Six, possibly. And Hannah John Kamen, who I do really like, but she keeps appearing in bad films. So she needs to just, I don't know, get a new agent or something. She was in the
Yeah.
Resident she was in the Resident Evil movie, the Welcome to Raccoon City one, as Jill Valentine, which unfortunately I didn't enjoy at all. Um, but yeah, she's great, and everything she's in, I just think she's great. She just really needs a really good role to get her teeth into. And the only, I'm not selling it. Sorry, I'm not always this negative. And the only other thing I saw was the Outwaters, which I saw today, and I'm pretty sure if I remember correctly, you saw in theaters, right?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, I saw it in theaters the weekend it came out and it was wild. I love it.
Yeah, I'm not quite sure if I love it. Not yet, anyway. It might
Yeah.
again. I've only saw it today. I didn't see it in theaters, so I imagine the theater experience is probably quite different.
Yes, it was like the fact that it's so dark and it's like so loud, which some of the like sounds like I would almost consider, I don't want to say cheap jump scares, but like some of the sounds didn't need to be so like
Screeching.
yeah, lots of screeching, but uh yeah, not a lot of things affect me. Uh,
Mhm.
I mean, not to sound like a edge lord or anything, but I mean, we just talked about what I've been watching lately. And I like
Yeah.
my stomach did not feel good after watching that movie. Not like because I'm squeamish, but
Okay.
like
Okay.
the like feeling of unknowable dread. Like
Mm.
I like cosmic horror a lot. I had just watched The Void like a couple days beforehand.
Oh
So
wow. Okay.
some other, you know, technical tech tentacle creatures and such.
Yeah.
So that was like a nice little like pairing, I guess you could
Mm.
say. Yeah,
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting. I'm
Yeah. I'm
interested
not sure
where
at
he
the moment.
goes next to this film. So
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure at the moment. I think I need to kind of um give it some more thought. Maybe watch some. I mean, I hate doing this because I feel like it's the easy way out. But like watching videos where you're like, what happened? What's going on? Like
yeah,
thoughts and theories regarding that because I was a little bit unsure. Did you see Skinamarink as well?
I did. I saw that in theaters also.
See, because that's the thing. I think Skinamarink and Outwaters haven't got like cinema releases in the UK, so there was no opportunity to do that. How did you feel about that one?
Another one I really loved it.
Right? Okay.
I I like analog horror. Like my sister and I
Hmm.
watch a lot of YouTube stuff, so his
Yeah,
YouTube
it felt
stuff.
like that, didn't it? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
it started off as a YouTube short, didn't it? Is that correct?
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts and theories about what is happening
Hmm.
uh in that movie. It's also like because of what I my theories are, like it's weirdly relatable. Like I
Yeah.
think
Okay.
maybe like I talked to another friend about it and she was like, "Yeah, it's just about like it's for kids whose parents got divorced or have like an alcoholic or abusive parent or something like that,
Hmm.
the feeling of like going and grabbing your sister and like going and sitting
Hmm.
in front of the TV and like let's not talk about mom or I don't know where dad is, like
Yeah,
that kind of
just that sort of escape. Yeah. There's
yeah,
like
so you got me.
I
Nightmares also. I used to have a reoccurring nightmare that was very much like everything that this movie is and like the feeling of staring
wow, okay.
into the corner because I'm too scared to look into the darkness and like very
Wow,
specifically
okay.
had nightmares about like a like a shadow figure coming out from under my bed. So like when the dad was like under the bed, I was like don't look under the bed. But
The
so in that
worst
way,
ASMR.
because it's so personal, I think that's why it's so
Hmm.
divisive. Of course, like not everyone had my childhood or had my reoccurring nightmares. So obviously
That's
it might
when we
ring.
covered it on the show. That was kind of our. Sorry. Finish that point,
Yeah,
Vannah.
yeah,
I didn't mean
I
to
just think
interrupt you.
maybe not everyone will resonate, but also like stylistically, if you are not into analog horror, it's just not gonna
I think
capture your attention, I guess.
yeah, I think that was what our thoughts on it were. When we covered it on the show a few weeks ago, and we kind of said, if this resonates with you, or it kind of evokes, a memory from your past, or um something like that, it's really, really going to work for you. If it doesn't do that, I think it's going to be really, really difficult to get into it. And I feel with someone who I really like. It sounds stupid. I don't want to. I don't want to say something that sounds this stupid. However, plot is very important to me,
Hmm.
and the fact that it's a very loose idea of what like a plot is. I guess sure, there's something there. There's something to sort of hang the story on. However, um, yeah, in terms of like character work is very loose. So yeah, for me, it didn't necessarily work, but it's definitely something I like to return to eventually. And I think I felt a little bit like that with the Outwaters, even though sure there's a little bit more going on. Um, very extreme in terms of sound and sight as well. I really liked all of the stuff that was like in daylight because I feel like any sort of daylight horror, Midsummer is a perfect example of that. It does evoke a certain feeling in me.
And like the deserts like that are pretty close to where I live. So
Wow, okay,
um
I see.
yeah, like my like I am more towards like the IE, but like yeah, it's everything around me is dirt. So
Hmm.
like that's always fun in a way, I guess, like having like this it was set and filmed like like I could drive there. So I think
Wow,
that's
okay,
like kind of fun, I think, watching certain
yeah,
movies. But
I
yeah,
totally understand.
yeah.
Hmm.
Analog horror as far as like Skinamarink, like yeah, plot is not a thing. So
No,
um
no, no.
it's like yeah, it you have to really want to be invested in order to
Hmm.
like follow it, but even then it's still gonna challenge it. It could be like 20 minutes shorter. Like that's I loved it to death, but
Yeah,
it was really
I feel
long.
like when you're in a theater as well, like it's so much easier to be invested because you're not gonna just randomly get your phone out and Google who's in it or who made it.
Yeah.
Whereas when you're at home watching it, maybe you're a bit more tempted to do that. Even if you're more tempted to Google what the hell's happening. Um, because sometimes I do that. But again, it's bad.
Yeah.
But like if you're watching a film, you're like, I'm a bit confused as to what just happened. I'm just going to look on
Yeah.
Wikipedia very quickly just so I can so I
Do it
can
a lot.
understand what's happening for this next sequence, for example. Um, but yeah, I completely understand that. I feel like if something feels close to home in that
Hmm.
way, well, like I could drive there and watch that um unfolding in front of me. That is very scary. I mean, perfect example for me, 28 Days Later, which is filmed on digital, set in the UK. It fit like motorways in the UK, like blocks of flats. It is so like that is the perfect representation of what the UK is actually like, apart from the rage fueled zombie people.
Aside
And
from the
even that,
apocalypse. Yeah.
exactly, it's kind of
Oh,
like it's grimy, and it's kind of like everything just feels a bit like, yeah, that is the perfect example of that, because that film hit me so hard, and I had nightmares for weeks and weeks on end just because it felt like I could open my door and it would be there.
that's crazy. Yeah, I love that movie. Yeah, I think
Yeah,
maybe like it's hard, I guess, being someone from Southern California and like that's where Hollywood is and that's where all the like
yeah.
studios are and like I the amount of times I've been on the studio tour at Universal and
Oh wow,
like
okay.
sometimes I think not that I'm not from LA, but I'm like an hour away or something. Like sometimes I think I take for granted the recognizability of settings in film.
Hmm.
Um but yeah, so I think that's interesting. And which is also interesting because I recently rewatched 28 Days Later, like maybe a couple months ago, and
Wow, okay.
I like I knew it was British. Like I knew that, you know, but like
Yeah.
when I was rewatching it, because I don't think I had rewatched it since being like maybe in like middle school or high school. My
Hmm.
friend and I used to watch zombie movies every week. And I was like, wow, this is very like this is very this is its identity is not just its setting, but it's very much about like the UK itself. And I was like, that's
Yeah,
interesting.
definitely. I agree.
Interesting
I
to
think
think
it's honestly one of the best representations of the UK set to put to film, and it's about an apocalyptic, horrible um, zombie rage virus. But
yeah.
yeah, because sometimes, like, especially when here's a perfect example. I keep saying this. I'm sorry. Here's a perfect example of the UK represented badly. So I've not actually seen this show, but my partner does watch it. So do you know the show? So obviously the show no, you which
Mm,
is on Netflix, about the, I'm not sure what the
I
guy's
know of
name
it, but I
is.
have not watched it.
I've never seen it. However, the third series of You, this character who's been established as living in the US for so long, has moved to the UK, where he's like living in Kensington in the middle of London, and he's studying at a university.
Mhm.
It's like the most cliched, over the top version of like what London is seen through the eyes of somebody who's not from London. Now I know these things happen, you know, if a British filmmaker was making something set in the US, there are probably loads and loads of mistakes like that. But for
Mhm.
that, it's like I did say, I said the UK isn't like that. The UK is like 28 Days Later. Just go and watch that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's interesting also thinking about like being someone who's so invested in like the context of a film. I was also uh very conscious of the fact when I rewatched 28 Days Later like a couple months ago that I was like, I don't know anything about their politics. Like I know Amber has mentioned like her gripes with like Eden Lake and
Mm.
like
Oh
when I
yeah.
watch Eden Lake it just makes me think of the way like Southern America is just like
Yeah.
Hill Highs and Wrong Turn and
Mm.
Texas Chainsaw and a bunch of hicks, So I think watching it, like I'm just watching it and I'm like, ooh, Michael Fassbender is so cute. But then I'm like, oh, I don't think I've ever really considered like the fact that I have no idea, like I'm listening to the radio in the beginning, hearing them talk
Mm.
politics about, what's wrong with the kids these days, but like not actually having lived there, like it doesn't like
Yeah.
mean
I
much
mean,
more that, I
there's
guess, if that makes sense. So I think that's interesting to
there's probably
think
an
about.
incredible amount of parallels between like the US and the UK in terms of
Yeah, but it's like
politics.
so like it's so saturated in like American horror films. Like exploitation is such a big
Mm.
thing that like I think it's
Yeah.
like I don't care. Like I
Yeah.
it's obviously I think it like has problematic elements like
I mean, Eden. So
organizing for
uh,
people, but I think it's because it's so saturated and like so foundational to the horror genre, it's like taken for granted. And so I
yeah.
don't ever think about like my personal relationship to those politics as much. Whereas like one
I
of the
think
only
Eden Lake is an extreme. Sorry, I keep interrupting you when
you're
you
okay,
kind
you're
of.
okay.
Um, Eden Lake is sure an extreme example, an extreme version of something that's rooted in reality. Like,
Okay.
sure, the behavior of these people maybe seems a bit over the top, and the fact that somebody's like inherently evil and would commit such evil acts, but as somebody who's from like I guess a background where I've been around those sort of people. Again, not inherently evil, but yes, people who would probably like we've all been. I've definitely been in situations like that where I feel
Yeah.
very uncomfortable, and and families, even like families that he sort of comes from. Sure, again, a really probably negative portrayal of a family like that, but I don't think it's terribly far from reality. I've yeah, so I think I would also say Eden Lake is also another good example. Sure, there are plenty of gripes that I probably got with it, particularly the actor who plays the sort of young bastard. What's his name? I can't remember what his name is.
I don't know. No, yeah,
But
I
yeah,
think it's because like I said, like I live near like everything's dirt and all there is to do here is like do drugs and get in trouble and like there's still like everybody has their Trump signs out and whatever, so it's like
wow, okay,
even still however many years later, so it's like yeah, like that is when I watched that movie it reminds me of home. So like
wow, okay,
I'm like,
wow.
oh, those kids are every kid down my
Mm,
block. So I think that's interesting, maybe like so, which almost like I don't want to say like is a blinder in a way, but then because I'm like, oh, that's so relatable, like I think it's almost interesting that it's like, oh wait, that's a whole different country with a whole different politics. Like, why are these kids' lives so relatable to
mm,
mine? So that's interesting. Yeah.
yeah, it's definitely
Weird, weird,
interesting. I'm sure.
weird tangent about.
Yeah,
Brit-
and I'm sure like UK politics, like it probably it reacts a lot to US politics. So I always feel like
yeah.
sometimes things happen in US politics that I feel like maybe, oh, that was a couple of months ago in the UK. That was very front and center.
Mhm.
And then, or maybe the other way around as well. Like the UK seems to react to certain things that happen in US politics as well. And a lot of things that happen in US politics are big talking points in the UK as well. Um,
Yeah, we
it's
have
got
like
like,
such a with globalization and like, all that. It's like we have such a like influence. I don't say that in like a like conceited way, but like yeah, I think the US is always like so on blast and like everyone has like what's going on in the US like
yeah,
shoved down their throats all the time.
yeah,
So,
definitely.
yeah.
But yeah, there are always parallels, and I think a lot of people in the UK can often say things like, "Oh, it's not as bad as it is in the US," and I always go, "It's not far off." I wouldn't say it was far off. Um, there are people in power who probably would make certain big decisions that are very similar to big decisions being made in the US. Abortion law, trans
Mhm.
rights, things like that. I don't think the people in power in the UK aren't capable of making those sort of decisions. So I would say it's not all that different. Um, okay, that was a tangent, but
That was yeah,
um,
quite the
we
tangent.
we love a tangent on this show. There's nothing wrong with that. Um, Usually very like UK specific tangents we go on, so it's good to be able to go off on a tangent that kind of covers something internationally as well. But today we're going to be talking about, so we're going to be talking about I Spit on Your Grave. We're going to talk about the original 1978 movie, but also leaning into the 2010 remake as well. If you listened to the show before, you may have heard we've done some sort of remakes versus original episodes. We did The Last House on the Left. We've done My Bloody Valentine. We've done the Amityville Horror. So this is going to be a similar format to that. So I Spit on Your Grave, which was originally titled Day of the Woman, is a 1978 American rape and revenge film written and directed by Meir Zarchi. Is that correct?
I think
I always
so. I
say,
hear some people say Zarky and some people say Zarchi, but I've never heard anyone tell me definitively what it
yeah,
is.
I always say difficult to pronounce names with a question mark on the end, just so people know that maybe I'm not sure. So the film tells the story of Jennifer Hills, a fiction writer based in New York City, who exacts revenge on each of her tormentors after four men gang rape and leave her for dead. One kind of question I did have about this and other things is it? I mean, I guess it's common, or is it completely um, true to say that rape revenge movies are usually always directed by men?
Yeah, so far there are exceptions.
Mhm.
There's a couple like early like I think Bad Girls or something like there's a couple like really early in the 70s and I think like Gator Bait, I think like stuff like that. There's like sprinkled in, but
Okay.
most of the time it's men, and that's exactly why I was interested in the topic in the first place, writing about it. Like there's like I said, there's a few sprinkled in, and like only recently have I seen or perceived an uptick in female directed, or at least the ratio of male to female directed. Like with
Hmm.
Revenge and MFA both came out the same year, and they were both by directed by a woman.
Hmm.
Violation directed by co-directed, I think, by women, and then Promising Young Woman is more of like a thriller, I guess, not really horror,
Yeah.
but also directed by a woman. So like recently it's like a little bit more exclusively, but yeah, especially in the
Hmm.
70s, mostly men.
Yeah. Um, and then of course the 2010 American remake, which was directed by Stephen R. Monroe, and obviously it's based on the original um, film as well. I've got some of the ratings we've got across the board on here. So the original's got 5.6 on IMDb, the remake 6.2, Rotten Tomatoes, 51% critic score for the original, 40% audience score, and the remake, 31% critic score, 47% audience score. And the
Hmm.
letterbox scores are fairly similar, 2.8 out of 5 for the original, 2.6 for the remake. I've got a couple of choice reviews here from Letterboxd. Rat Bastard says, who knows who Rat Bastard is going around reviewing these films. Notorious exploitation / revenge flick, gritty, brutal, disturbing, hopeless, repellent, uncompromising. I think I agree with all of those, but he's only given it 2 stars. He or she. I don't know how Rat Bastard identifies. Stacey Bates says she did that. 3.5 stars.
You did.
And Paulana Sawyer says the exploitation film and perhaps one of the most misunderstood movies ever. Camille Keaton's performance is on par with Marilyn Burns in Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And she's gone straight in and given it 5 stars. So yeah, a nice cross section there. It does seem, from looking at the reviews, people kind of stand in one place or another, which is like, this is horrible. Why would anybody like this film? It's disgusting. It's difficult to watch. And other people are just like, you go.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I would say like the reviews calling it the most misunderstood, I think is spot
Mm.
on. And that's exactly why the reviews are so flip-floppy, I guess.
Yeah. Um, so it starts. So Camille Keaton's Jennifer Hills. Um, I was just thinking, is she the only woman? Oh no, I was going to say she's the only woman in the movie, but obviously there are some smaller roles. A lot there. It's interesting that this film also shows a lot of the women in the lives of what just one particular character, but one of the criminals as well. And this is really this is done in very interestingly, I believe, in the remake as well.
Yeah.
Um, Now, the remake throws something else into the mix, which is somebody in a position of authority
Hmm.
also participating in the crimes. Which, how did you feel about that? Was that just like another level to this already, horrific scenario?
Yeah, I think it's interesting. It's one of those things where, obviously I don't really know what their real intention was, but my what I have pinpointed is so the early films like Last House, the cops almost have like clown music behind their scenes. Like they're
I mean, they
so like
literally do have clown music, don't they?
it's so it's very like silly and I think
Yeah.
the 70s were very much a period like following Vietnam and like counterculture hippie movement. It was very much like questioning the institutions that are in place and like I would say poking fun.
Mhm.
Whereas like I Spit on Your Grave, the original one, like it's not even they're not even present. There's no law enforcement. Like it's never
Yeah.
necessarily attempted, I guess, to approach law enforcement with what happened. And
Because that's one of the things where somebody watching that might say, why doesn't she approach law enforcement or call the police in it? Whereas in the remake, it sort of shows you exactly why she didn't.
yeah,
So
and I
obviously
would
the
say like what I what I pretty much theorize is that it's trying to be much more damning of law enforcement. I think in line with what Meir Zarchi's actual intention was with the original. The like not just that law enforcement or the legal system doesn't help survivors, but it also plays a role in traumatizing
Mhm.
survivors or re-traumatizing survivors or even perpetuating violence. And obviously more recently we've become so much more aware of like police brutality and things like that, so I think it's like Yeah, they're not only are they useless and like catching people who do these things, but they are also doing these things. So I think that's actually like one of the thing, like I think the remake's pretty like mid, but I think that is one of the specific things about the remake that is its most redeeming quality. Like that's
Yeah,
such that's such a like I don't want to say ballsy, but like that's a pretty big like accusation to make at,
yeah,
the law enforcement
yeah,
in
of
your
course.
country, you know?
But also, that was something that films in, I reckon, from like 2005 maybe through to 2000, and actually right up to, I was going to say up to Get Out, maybe
Mm,
up to Get Out, where these films put this person in a situation, and then very early on in the movie, they give the main character what seems to be a way out. Suddenly, safety is presented to them,
mm,
um, and you think, well, this is only like 30 minutes into the movie, but
yeah.
suddenly they're safe. Well,
Yeah.
I wonder what's going to happen now. And then that safety suddenly becomes a threat as well. And then I really like that. I think that's
Yeah.
a good sort of fake out, I guess, in a way. Um, but yeah, also in the remake and in the original, very interesting how he sort of it tries to like now obviously bear in mind take from this what you will, and of course add to this or shut it down however you like. Um, it kind of like attempts to humanize some of these characters in a way that like media does treat like the perpetuate the people who commit like sexual assaults. You know, a lot of people it will go, this person was a swimmer, he was absolutely, and then suddenly he's committed this terrible crime. Swim
Yeah.
or a person from a lovely background, or they'll have like a character witness who sort of says this guy was lovely. He's done all these horrible things, and in a way, the media like pushes that narrative of trying to like humanize these people while also at the same time dehumanizing the victim. And I feel like this film, the remake and the original, kind of did that, where it's like, oh, this guy's committed these terrible acts. However, but look, he's a loving father. He's a loving husband. Um, almost I mean it wouldn't do that for I'd say almost everybody who would watch this movie, obviously, because you see the acts unfold in front of you. But it's an interesting kind of decision to make as well, because it really does show that these people just exist in society, um participate in society in this way, but are still very capable of these kind of things.
Yeah, that's something I like about the like when I in my, each chapter I am pairing I Spit on a Grave with Last House on the Left, so that's one of those things where I think Last House is so foundational, but what really like the way the genre like or subgenre progresses, I think it's one of those things where it's like a double-edged sword where you can read it as being kind of like um like you said, like humanizing in the way that like we excuse uh people who commit these crimes. Like it's often in media used as like a like, oh, but he has such a bright future, and
Mm-hmm.
like in that way. But I personally like that they are humanized.
Mm-hmm.
Like when put side by side with like Krug and the guys from Last House on the Left, because
Yeah.
70s, that's when second wave feminism was, you know, really challenging the popular understandings of rape at the time. And because for so long things like marital rape were not recognized and things like that, like the idea that date rape could happen and was like not
Mm.
recognized at all. So a lot of the critiques of early films are that like um every rapist is this crazy criminal that just has this like they're these rabid,
Mm,
humans that have no thoughts and things like that versus like no, like your husband, your brother, your dad,
mm,
your police officer, your mayor, your boss, they could be doing those things. And I think that because that's, where they were kind of coming from, there's like this myth, like this stranger danger myth, which I think this still falls under because it's still
yeah,
gang rape that happens in the forest and not like films like
yeah,
recently Violation where it's like someone you're actually personally close to, but it's very much trying to be like, no, these are just like regular dudes who just thought they had nothing better to do. They're they're not like criminal masterminds or anything.
they're definitely not criminal masterminds by
Yeah.
any sense of the word. And it's also one of those things where you think, is this the first time they've done this? Or if it isn't, how many people have they done it to before? The fact that they're so willing to just, I mean, I guess not kill somebody, kind of like palm off the actual act of murder to somebody who's perhaps not entirely capable of making of sound mind. He's definitely mentally disabled. Um, so yeah, it's a very like yeah, very harrowing watch for anybody, isn't it?
hmm Yeah, I think that's one of the things that really like is probably why it was such a divisive or
Mm-hmm.
controversial. Like I think that's one of the things that Roger Ebert like points out in his negative review of the film, like that they are
Yeah,
normal guys and that like the men in the theater were like identifying with them. And I'm like,
yeah.
that's not a condemnation of the
Well,
film, Roger. That is
no.
that is
So
a
Roger
condemnation of the men you're sitting in the theater with. Like that's the
Roger Ebert called it a vile bag of garbage.
yeah,
Um,
he's
so yeah,
a lot of
he didn't
thoughts about
enjoy it. He didn't enjoy it one bit, unfortunately. But yeah, I know what you mean. The thing is, it must have been. I can't even imagine like what it would have been like watching it in theaters in the 70s as well. Like it would have
Yeah.
affected everybody in such a different way that like you have to like respect it for the fact that it would take that standpoint and sort of be such a divisive, but also and again evoking. I keep saying this, but evoking such an extreme reaction from people. Some
Yeah.
people who probably be
He's
like,
also like just as upset that a woman cheered for Jennifer as he was
yeah,
men cheering for the rapist. So I'm like, the fact that you equate those two crimes is like I
yeah, that's
it's an interesting thing to
it's an
ponder.
interesting take, Roger, and it's interesting that you put it to print
Mhm.
uh
Yeah.
forever.
He went on like a smear campaign. Like he and the other guy from that he did reviews with like went on like television to like
Hmm.
be this is what's wrong with our country. Like they're like women are like naked on film and like they went on like a whole moral crusade about it. So
And again, parallels with current society
yep.
as well, like the
Yeah.
moral crusades.
Yeah.
When their crimes committed, often the arts get sort of dragged into anything. It was the
Mhm.
video games, it was the violent movies, it was the extreme music and all that stuff. It was heavy metal in the 80s. But yeah, it feels like we're just reliving the same sort of things over and over again. But it's still interesting to look back on
Yeah.
and how they were affected. So the film starts with short story writer Jennifer Hill. She lives in Manhattan. She rents an isolated cottage in Connecticut near the Housatonic River in Litchfield County to write her first novel. Um, I mean, even like in terms of really, I hate it when they read out bits of her book as well.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
I think that's like almost like I don't want to say worse. Like that sounds bad, but like that's what gets me. Like after all that, you had to like tear
Mm.
her down, like tear her writing down, like that like made me so upset.
That definitely solidified the hate, I think. Like the hate was there. Um, but yeah, that solidified it because that's just like, oh, it's just so humiliating for the for absolutely added insult to injury.
Mm.
Um, so yeah, she arrives in town and she stops to get some gas, which is really cheap because it's 1978. What was it like? fill fill the fill the tank up for like $2 or something like that. Lovely. Um, and it's a two. So there's a gas station manager guy who is Johnny. That's correct, isn't it? And then Stanley and Andy are the two. See, because I watched the remake like the most recently, even though I pretty much watched them back to back. I can only picture them at the moment. There's one guy like dungarees. Um, uh, yeah, okay. And then that is when she has her groceries delivered by Matthew Duncan,
Yeah.
who it says here mildly mentally disabled. Um, I didn't even know you could get groceries delivered in 1978. I was like, hang on a minute. I don't think I could get my anything delivered to me when I was a kid, like in the 80s and 90s. In 1978, doing deliveries. Can I
Yeah,
just
and that now they just charge you like a million fees to deliver it.
yeah.
But yeah, I know
You can
that's
have
interesting. I guess maybe like small town, like
yeah.
grocery. I guess in the setting of the film, I guess it kind of makes sense that maybe
Mm,
like the milkman would come put milk on your
yeah.
door. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Is that is that a detail in the remake that's included? I don't think it is it? They kind of just happen
He
to
he fixes her toilet. He's like a
Oh
handyman.
yeah, that's right. That's right, yeah.
That the guy who's renting it to her, I guess, hires. I
Yeah,
guess. So, yeah, another way to introduce him separately to her, but yeah, not with
of course.
groceries.
But it's the same sort of scenario where she is a novelist who is basically traveling to this place to work on her next book or first book in privacy. Um, but yeah, I guess so many kind of fears will be touched upon in this scenario, which is obviously strange. Yeah, there's lots of difficult things to discuss here. The fact that they are clearly like goading her in a way, or I guess it's like stalking her to try and make her feel very uncomfortable. Um, and then obviously it descends from there. But yeah, so Matthew Duncan, he reports back to the other three men who are just like bumming about, useless guys, throwing a knife at the ground. Just how'd you pass how'd you pass the time here in Litchfield County? I just throw a knife at the ground for 8 hours a day. Oh yeah. Um, and then reports back to them. He tells them about Jennifer. Does he say it says there in the Wikipedia descriptions claiming he saw her breasts? Does he say that? What was the
I
scenario where you thought that?
I think like maybe because she's not wearing a bra that like
Hmm.
he could see through her shirt, maybe. I don't know. I think that was
Hmm.
yeah. I guess she's also wearing like little shorts and stuff. Um, so I think I
Because
maybe that's the implication because I think this also like thinking about like the 70s and stuff like that's when like we started the whole like burn your bra thing and yeah, so she's almost like a very like new type of woman, like newly
yeah.
independent, newly wearing short shorts and
Hmm.
no bra kind of thing.
Newly independent, but like confident enough to just be on her own in this scenario in a new town, and that probably is initially what the people from that small town find strange, the fact that she's there alone, um, and of course there's a lot made about what she's wearing, not just about what she's wearing in this scene, but later on when she's wearing a bikini, which kind of like doubles down on the idea that these men are sort of making excuses for the acts that they're about to commit by um claiming you know, based on what she's wearing, that she's essentially asking for it, which is what they're saying, isn't it? Um, yeah. So first of all, they start like just cruising by the cottage in their boat and prowling around the house at night, all like really, really odd behavior for anyone, let alone like three men,
Hmm.
and when a woman's on her own as well. So yeah. Um, when so did they like what do they do around the house in the first instance? They because obviously it's a lot different in the remake because they pretty much just like force their way in immediately, don't they?
Yeah, I think it was like just sounds or something, like rustling
Yeah,
or something hitting the house. It was something like small, like I think she just heard stuff going on,
yeah,
and I remember her like coming out of the house to like see what's outside. But yeah, I don't think they did anything further. They
no.
kind of were just
In
lurking out.
in the in the remake, after the kind of toilet fix, so she like kisses. No,
Yeah,
is that?
yeah.
I mean,
And
even that, I was a bit like, yeah, that was
I
kind
I
of
was
a
like,
strange
girl, what?
decision, right?
Just like, I mean, yeah, that's weird. I don't know. That's like invading his personal space. That's like a
Yeah, it
very
says
weird do.
she rewards him with an abrupt kiss of gratitude. Do you think that's just because she sees him as like maybe possibly having some sort of learning disability that she thinks perhaps he'd appreciate that more in some way, or that she feels in a way that obliged to? It's a strange decision, isn't it? Even for like
I
this film.
almost I don't know. Yeah, it was very weird, but I guess I almost read it as like infantilizing him, like
Yeah.
because of his I guess what they're posing as like disability. Like
Mm.
she almost treats him like he's a kid. Like, you know, if a little kid did something for you, you'd give him a little ruffle his little hair on his head or something, you know, like I think like it felt like that. She was like, "Oh, thank you so much." Like, sweet
Thanks for
boy.
cle-
Yeah.
thanks for fixing my toilet.
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah, it seemed weird to
Another
me. Like I could only imagine it was because she saw him as
yeah. So
innocent. But
there's nothing
it's
like
still weird to me. I don't know. He's still a grown man.
yeah,
Don't kiss me.
it's kind of
That's so
strange. There's nothing like that in the original. She kind of just talks to, doesn't she say to him about being his friend? I think she sort of says that.
yeah,
And
like, oh,
again,
I'm
yeah, maybe like
yeah.
yeah, because I think he kind of like almost talks about his problems in a way to her, doesn't he? He opens up to her. There's obviously an interesting incident which happens in the remake, which is when the gas station attendant dude, I'm guessing is Johnny, he kind of does make a pass at Jennifer, and she pretty much, well, she just flat out rejects him, which interestingly, I mean, nothing like that tends to happen. It seems like a completely out of the blue attack in the 1978 version, whereas this one, even though this is obviously a bruised ego, um the male ego being bruised, and obviously he feels a need to like teach her a lesson in a way. So at least there's like a jumping off point in the remake, which kind of tries to make you understand the reasons behind these terrible actions.
Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that. Um, it's interesting because things like she dresses a lot more um I don't want to say conservatively, but it's just like because she's just wearing like pants and
Mm,
a shirt or whatever, like whatever, a casual outfit. So she's not like necessarily dressed revealing. So it's interesting that the like instead of a simple fixation on the
mm,
visibility of her body, that it's like some sort of actual perceived wrongdoing. Like
yeah,
very is it very much, in my opinion, like tries to give motive.
yeah,
Like you said, like try to
mm,
understand where it's coming from, which I think is odd to
yeah.
do. But at the same time, he did make a pass at her first. So
Is it
I'm
because she
um,
kind of like rejects him, but like in front of his friends, and they kind of like laugh, and you could tell in terms of like the power dynamic going on in that group, he's clearly he's what he would consider the alpha male in that scenario. So the fact that he's kind of been humiliated in that way immediately, someone who's clearly obviously already got a chip on their shoulder when it comes to their interactions with the opposite sex, he's already kind of like willing to pretty much do anything now to punish her, I guess, and humiliate her like she humiliated him, but in a completely warranted way, I guess.
Yeah, I would say maybe, I guess an interesting way to think about it might be again like the context of like in the original, like it's already quite wild that a woman would just go stay somewhere by herself, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think that already the idea of an independent woman itself was so like jarring that like that was a sole uh trigger for needing to feel like superior to her. Like her presence alone was a threat
Yeah,
to the masculinity, whereas I guess maybe like in 2010, like yeah, women are alone all the time. Like that's common. That's not like a weird concept anymore. So maybe that was like why they needed to like find another reason, I guess, for her to pose a threat to their masculinity,
mm.
um, other than just her presence alone. But I don't know. It's odd because it almost feels like a way to make them feel justified.
Yeah,
Not that I would ever agree, but like I'm when I'm watching it, I'm like, are they trying to make me like understand why they would do this? Like the like I don't know. It's kind of an odd
yeah.
addition. But
It's an odd choice. It's an interesting choice, I guess. But
his
regardless of
line definitely made me cringe. I was like,
what was the line? Can you remind me? Because I don't
I don't,
remember.
it's some, I don't know. I think it's something
Oh
to do with
god.
her car, I think. Like, I don't know.
Oh, and she pretty much straight up says, "Has that line ever worked for you before?" Jesus.
Yeah, I was like, yeah, like get him, which is like
Whoa.
warranted. Like, I don't want to be hit on. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, weird. Um, this, but to be fair, like everybody involved in this movie, in terms of like that they're convincing as scumbags. I
Mhm.
think not that it feels weird, kind of like like commenting on their roles like that, but they're all good scumbags where
Yeah,
you immediately.
another thing I think I kind of pointed out was that like in the original one, she's almost like a like the fact that they're kind of like stalking her a bit, and then like she's kind of just like hanging out on the lake, and then
Mm,
they kind of corral her. I likened it to a um like a deer being hunted at the
okay.
watering hole, like that these men see themselves as like hunters, and they're like for for sport. Like there's prey out there waiting to be
Mm,
shot. Like, nothing about hunting is like, you know, killing an unsuspecting deer is not, nothing more than sport. So like the fact that it's in the woods and she's kind of like laying around unsuspectingly, it's kind of has that hunter dynamic because they're like
mm.
stalking her beforehand. Versus this one, like they liken her to a show pony a lot.
Oh yeah, of
So it's
course.
like
Yeah,
rather
they.
than something laying around vulnerable to be hunted, it's like something that needs to be tamed,
Yeah.
which like how I mentioned, like her presence alone was enough of a trigger versus like a woman who would actually call you out on your
Yeah.
stupid pickup lines is like the next step. So it's like rather than hunting, some like,
Vulnerable prey. It's almost like they're trying
low
to.
on the yeah, low on the food chain animal, like that's has no defense versus like this, like they use like specifically like horse language. Like this
Yeah,
is a
there's
horse
loads of that, isn't there? Yeah.
who needs to be like broken,
Because they
which
mentioned that she's like, oh, she's stuck up, she's snobbish, and she comes into the small town and she thinks she's better than us. So there's loads of really interesting sort of themes surrounding that, and they're like obviously in terms of as men feeling like this person from the outside who maybe is from a different class in a way has come into your town, and like that's infuriating as it is. They must be thinking.
yeah.
Um,
Have you seen Deliverance?
I've seen Deliverance a long time ago. Yes.
Um, in what's it called? In Men, Women, and Chainsaws, Carol Clover
Oh yeah.
specifically talks about like that, like rape, revenge, in relation to I Spit on Your Grave and Deliverance being very much a like class dynamic, which
Mhm.
like you could trace to something like Eden Lake or something, that it's about these like rich people coming into their like
Yeah.
taking vacation in people's daily lives. Like,
Yeah.
um, so I think that's a really interesting point, that it's not just like gendered oppression or anything like that, that
Yeah.
it's like very men who feel emasculated because of their class position have to find another way to like one up someone
Yeah.
else. Yeah.
One-upmanship. Yeah, of course. No, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Um, and I guess more focused on in the remake than I mean it's present in the original, I think, but um it's definitely front and center in in the remake because so obviously it starts in a different way. In the original, it starts off they kind of like just follow her around in her boat, don't they? And then pretty much she runs onto a bank to try and get away, and that is when they all attack her essentially at the same time. Whereas in the remake, they actually break into her cabin, um, and it's kind of like the fact that one of them's filming it as well. It
Yeah,
kind
I
of makes
find
me,
a lot of that to be just like kind of part of the canon of horror at the time. There's a lot of like
yeah,
voyeurism and uh like the
voyeurism,
can like
found footage as well. Yeah,
yeah, like I guess obviously the technical like innovation of having handheld cameras in general, but like as far as like public consumption of them, that like everyone can start recording things. But I think like I feel like that's common a lot in like horror at the time, as well as like the home invasion, um
yeah, yeah,
which I liken to like torture porn and like post 9/11, like the feeling of having your safe space invaded, and like whether it's your country or your home or your
yeah.
family, but that's kind of where that like fear kind of stems from. So I think it's interesting
Mm.
that it's not like it's just some, you're not like out in the open, like that you're they they came in. They were
Yeah,
gonna get in no matter what you did.
yeah.
Which again,
It
when they're
is.
stalking her beforehand, like they're filming her in this one, in the remake, whereas before they
Yeah,
were just kind of like messing around, but they're specifically like filming her and she's
mm,
like not dressed and all that stuff.
yeah.
It's
Again,
creepy.
it's
I
that
think about that all the
part.
time. I hate having my windows open. I'm like, there's people out there.
Yeah, I mean, is very. It adds a different unpleasant nature to the proceedings, which are obviously unpleasant enough. And also when he got told to burn the tape, just knew. There's no way he's burning that tape.
Nope.
That tape is coming back. Chekhov's tape is coming back into this plot for some reason or another. Um, so yeah, in terms of the attack in the original, um, prolonged, I think is a way of sort of describing it because yeah, it's I think some films would probably not shy away of showing an attack like this, but maybe there might be a cutaway, or maybe it wouldn't last too long. We get the idea of it, but this is prolonged, and I think that's obviously done on purpose to try and really put you in the position of what something like this could be like, a prolonged attack, and something where you're completely and utterly helpless as well.
Yeah, I think that's what's the most like a lot of reviews would call it a 30-minute or 24-minute rape
Mhm.
scene, which is like obviously not really what's happening. Like that's a, you know, a but it feels that way because she's kind
Yeah,
of like the fact that they let her just walk away and then they
yeah, that
her again and then she walks away again and then they're in her home. It's so like
it's just those moments where
um
you think, right, it's
really
surely it's
deep
over
down.
now. Like similar to the last house on the left as well. That there were even moments in that where someone would run away, and you think, okay, they're getting away, they're very close to safety, or maybe the attack's over now, they're just going to let them live, and then the characters go, well, we can't let them live. They're a witness to sort of our crimes. So yeah, in the way that I kind of mentioned that the fact that films sometimes just put that freedom there ever so close, um, and just snatch it away from you, or away from a character, sorry, at the last moment
Yeah, and I had
is
seen it already, obviously, but I forgot like when she like is crawling to the phone in the original one and he like kicks the phone out, like it totally like I was totally jump scared. I was like it made me like I just wasn't expecting to
yeah,
jump because I think the sound of the phone like ringing too, but I was just like, oh, I knew they attack her in her home, but I, for some
yeah.
reason, it had been long enough since I had seen it last that I was like,
It's
oh
because it's
goodness.
like nighttime as well now. So you kind of think enough time must have gone by that they've just, left. That they're not, surely they wouldn't still be around. So I think she does realize that they obviously planned her abduction so that Matthew could lose his virginity.
Yeah,
Um, and I think in those initial stages when the initial attack takes place, I mean, something really horrible about it being in this like overgrown area as well, like this kind of it's so remote that it feels like she's definitely not close to safety or anybody possibly hearing or coming to help. Um, but yeah, so Matthew obviously doesn't initially participate. Um, it says here in the description that he does it out of respect and pity for her, but I don't know if where do you see Matthew's role in all of this? Because
I, yeah, I definitely would not agree with that statement.
no,
Um,
no.
yeah, it's interesting because it's a common theme, obviously, since it's in both the original and remake. I wouldn't it's not necessarily like there's a weak link in the original Last House, but I think the connection between Krug's son and Matthew is a little more um like similar in the remake of Last House, like that there's
Mhm.
this weak link that we need to like um
Exploit
peer
in a way.
pressure into like
Yeah,
proper masculinity, which I
and
think
in
is
a
an
way,
interesting
it's kind of
concept because that is part of, there are men that maybe under other circumstances would not perhaps commit certain crimes, but because of the pressures of masculinity and things like that. So it's an interesting
yeah, most
concept,
definitely.
but it's still it's but that very specific like idea that it's out of like pity, I don't know. Yeah, I think he his judgment is obviously impaired
Yeah, his
since
judgment's
like
impaired, but I don't think I ever think he's again. I'm not trying to sound disrespectful to anybody, but he is a functioning person in society. He's got a job,
yeah.
so I'm almost but his judgment, while maybe impaired, I still kind of think even this character and the character in the 2010 version, he knows the difference between right and wrong. And while these other men are coercing him into this scenario, and I could totally understand where the story's coming from in terms of his role in it. Also feels like a lot of the characters are kind of involving him almost to give themselves reasoning for why they're committing these acts. Like they don't want. It's not like, oh, we're not committing the act of rape. We're just assisting Matthew in losing his virginity. It's almost like they're just yeah
Yeah,
talking about it like
more
that.
so in the original. Yeah, I like his role a lot more in the original, I think. Like
Yeah,
because of the added injury of Johnny's ego at the gas station, it's
yeah,
so much more charged for other
yeah.
reasons. Whereas, like, it in the original, yeah, it very much feels to me like they are just, they have nothing better to do with their day, but they're
Hmm.
going to pretend it's for Matthew.
Yeah.
And I think the dynamic, like, I think he seems so much more, I don't want to say scared of them, but he seems so much more in need of their approval, or like that they're gonna
Yeah.
beat him up. Like they beat him up in the original one. I don't remember if they do in the remake, but like they have
Yeah.
physically him, and he has no one. Like once Jennifer leaves, they're still the only guys he can hang around with, and he
Hmm.
knows that he's like the butt of the joke. And so it's like sad in that way, much more so in the original than the remake. I think like
Yeah.
his character is sad, but there's they don't necessarily pretend as much that it's all
No.
for Matthew. Like it's an element where they're like, yeah, Matthew, your turn, like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah.
it's not so much like we did this for you, Matthew. Like,
Yeah.
it he has obviously has his own motive because there's so
Hmm.
much more prolonged torture, quote unquote, before the actual like penetrative sexual assault, like with
Yeah.
the bottle and making her dance around and all that stuff in the remake. Like it's so much
Hmm.
more about humiliation than just like,
Yeah.
obviously when they read her stuff in the original one at the end, that's very much about humiliation,
Yeah.
but it's so much more like it effective. It gut gives me a little like gut punch when I watch the remake a lot. Like I am so
Mm.
sickened already before they even start sexually assaulting her in that way. Whereas like in the original, they kind of like are straight to business, like once they're on shore. So
Yeah.
it's interesting in that way, I guess, like in regards
Yeah.
to the
That's the
different
thing.
ways they torture her.
It's strange how it's framed as well, isn't it? Because obviously, again, the original is framed kind of like a in the daylight,
Hmm.
sort of like a nice summer's day as well. So it's kind of luring you into that false sense of security of like, here's a beautiful setting and this terrible thing's happening. Whereas in the remake, it's at a cabin, which obviously in horror most of the time is kind of perceived in a way of like somewhere that probably is could be pretty scary to be in, and there's probably plenty of different threats both inside and outside, and the fact that they forced their way in that home invasion angle and all
Yeah.
the things that kind of happen from that. Yes, with the bottle, and she's clearly, obviously, incredibly distressed from the moment. And it was just when she was saying things like, just leave, just leave me alone, just get out, all that stuff. Just, yeah, it was, yeah, tough
Yeah.
to sort of digest, I guess, in that way. Um, and again, yeah, sort of prolonged. Obviously, I'm just thinking about how when they eventually get there. So I think both Johnny and Andy in the original rape her, and it's then that she crawls back to the house. And obviously, like a significant amount of time has taken place, and just those actions of her like crawling back to the house, like, is she naked at this point? Just pretty much.
Yeah, in the original one, yeah,
Yeah.
she's definitely. like because she starts off in her bikini, like they
Yeah.
completely take that off from the beginning, and then like the entire time she's like walking around the forest and
Mm.
crawling home, like she's naked like the whole time, I
Oh,
think.
I've just remembered we didn't even mention the harmonica,
Oh,
which
yeah.
maybe something that is like associated with the exploitation side of things as well. You know, the sound of that, and the fact that it's like a precursor to like the next stage of these attacks as well. Just it's almost like a terrible way of describing it. And I'm just trying to say, it's like a musical interlude, isn't it?
Yeah, there's
But
not
it's got
really music in this other than his harmonica. Um, which I
yeah,
like. I like the mood without like music that's trying to like play it up, but it's like it is like a stand-in for that music that you would hear in a horror film that's like, ooh, the scare's coming up, like the
yeah.
tension building. So
I
then
mean,
you
the
you're like,
remake's got it.
yeah. Yeah, the
Yeah,
remake's a lot more of a like production.
polished. Yeah, yeah, like a sort of
Yeah.
polished. Yeah, whereas this feels um, like it does like the original. It just feels like a video nasty or like
Yeah. It's definitely self-funded. Meir Zarchi self-funded it and printed however many copies he needed to print to send it to people. But so it's very, very independent.
$80,000 budget. It looks like. Um, and Matthew does participate. It says after getting drunk, but I'm pretty sure he just has a swig or something, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't say he like got drunk. He definitely like did a little like pep up like
Yeah,
shot, like a little like swig, but yeah, not I don't yeah, I wouldn't say like he had to get plastered to do it.
yeah, and that's when they start like ridiculing her book. They're like ripping up the manuscript. They're reading out sections of it, but in a sort of patronizing, horrific way. Where you could read a section from any book, and if you put on that stupid voice, it's gonna
Yeah.
sound stupid.
It's so
Um,
mean. And I also like take note of the fact that like kind of in line like a lot of uh writers in films or like the classroom scenes are pretty common where it's like kind of almost meta in a way because she's writing like, oh, she's talking about escaping from her city life.
mm,
Like she's writing about a woman who's trying to escape her city life, and that's what she is doing. And so not only like did they disrupt the exact thing that she's trying to do, but they're mocking the writing that is
yeah,
like reflecting what the plot is, so it's like an extra level of like ridicule. Like you're not just my work, but like everything about me. It's
yeah.
just
But again, it's like a class thing as well, isn't it? Because they're obviously just like, oh, writing a book. Oh, aren't you great? Aren't you amazing? Aren't you so talented? And kind of just like
yeah.
mocking that side of her again, dehumanizing her in a way, which is obviously what they're attempting to do the whole way. And in the remake, do they pretty much do the book stuff?
I don't think so. Not that I can
I think
recall, but I think
I
it's
think they
because
don't they
she
look at her laptop and say, "Oh, you are a writer," because she's like writing, and then I think that's what maybe happens. Um,
yeah, it's not this
yeah,
theatrical like throwing around her pages and thing like
no.
that. They might mock it,
So
but not to the extent.
yeah, Jennifer does manage to escape in the remake. When there's a particular assault happening with a bottle, um, and she kind of like hits the guy, pepper sprays another one, um, and just runs out into the woods. And it's there that she bumps into the Sheriff Storch, and Earl, the old man who's like apparently the owner of the cabin. Now it's not obvious that he's a sheriff straight away because he's kind of just like they're in their hunting gear, aren't they? Um, and but yeah, and he goes, "Oh, don't worry, I'm a sheriff." So there is that moment. Well, if familiar with horror in any way, you go, "Oh no, oh no,
Yeah,
that's not good."
not
Um,
good. Yeah.
but
Ugh.
initially, So it's strange, isn't it? Because initially he seems to be like genuinely concerned, and then the mask starts to slip very quickly when he starts to almost find reasons to disbelieve her, or
Mhm.
so that there's alcohol there, that she's been smoking a bit of the old Mary Jane. He
Yeah.
casts doubt on her story essentially.
Yeah.
Um, and it's weird how quickly it turns from her, who's clearly been on the receiving end of something something terrible, traumatizing, and the sexual assault. But very quickly it flips that she's almost like trying to make excuses for herself and trying to she's like being persecuted in this way. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, all of the other guys have left at this point as well, and but they do return, and it's pretty much exactly the moment that you realize that this sheriff is also a wrong un. And they kind
Mhm.
of add a different sort of um undertone to his character, of him being like this really, well, him being like a caring father essentially, like talking to his daughter on the phone.
Not only that, but
um
like a man of God. And like he's literally like his daughter, whose name is Chastity, by the way,
wow, okay, okay.
is literally like, Dad, like you always make breakfast before church, and like Jennifer's literally being raped in the background. Like that's so like, ooh, it doesn't get more on the
Doesn't
nose
get
than that.
on the nose. Yeah, yeah, that's what I was going to say. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because obviously it's putting someone in a position of authority, a man of God, of course, as well, and a family man, and showing you that none of those things matter. If someone's inherently a scumbag,
Yeah.
inherently that kind of person, then these are the kind of things that they're going to do, um, with believing that there will be little to no consequence, especially as somebody in a position of authority who clearly seems to completely confident in the fact that they would easily get away with it. And I can't remember, in the remake, are they insistent on? They're not insistent on killing her straight, like to cover up their tracks, are they? I'm trying to
Um,
remember,
I would
because
say
obviously,
he does kind of
hmm,
after she runs away through the woods, I think he almost like
yeah, of course.
starts to orchestrate like a hunt for her. Um,
Hmm.
after she like, I think he's gonna come kill her, but then she like jumps off the bridge, and then he's like, "All right, everyone's checking the banks of all the,
Yeah,
the
yeah, that's
river,
right.
like, and they have to do it for like days. Like the guy, he's like, "All right, everyone has to go check and search," and it's very like, um, in a way, I don't want to say mastermind, but in a way, he's very much a like calculated, like, I don't know, sounds like you've done this before,
Yeah,
sir.
that exactly. Whereas perhaps in the original, you think this might just be potentially a one-off because there's no one sort of no one seems to be in control of the scenario. They kind of make the decision that, right, we're going to go and have to kill her now, and Matthew, you're going to have to do it. You're going to have to stab her in the heart. It feels like a sort of last-minute decision, like, oh, she's the witness to these crimes that we've committed. You're
Yeah.
gonna have to stab her, and here's how you do it. Whereas, yeah, in the remake, there is a mastermind involved, and obviously, as a man in a position of authority, he obviously is almost like, well, there's absolutely no way that this can get out.
Mhm.
I've got a family and all that shit.
Yeah. Yeah. Like
But they're
almost leader, which I think plays into the dynamics of the men too, that like that they are all just kind of none of them have real power, and maybe that's why they thought this would have been fun. And like, and then like, because then they continue to be like ridiculed by him too. Like it's not just
yeah.
Matt, like like Matthew in the original is the only one that's really like clowned on, versus like,
Hmm.
he's like, you taped it, like get rid of the tape. Like he goes in on all of them about how
Yeah.
like
Well,
stupid they are.
there's in the remake, there's a few key components to each of the characters that we need to kind of remember, especially when Jennifer starts to exact her revenge. Obviously, the guy who's filming, he likes to watch. The sheriff is an ass man. That's one thing that obviously that's that. I mean, that's the next level to it, isn't it? And that kind of makes you think that 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 humiliation and that the fact that he would go as far as that when exacting when committing these crimes goes to show you what kind of person he is as well. Who's the other guy? There's always one of these guys that I forget. What's the
Yeah.
whenever it like shows him, I go, "Who's that guy?" Oh yeah, he's here as well. Forgot about him. What happens to him? Oh yeah, I remember what happens to him, but I can't remember what the caveat is because obviously getting your eyes pecked out because you like to watch. We'll get
Yeah.
into that. We'll get into that. It might make
Yeah.
sense.
Wow, yeah, there's like one
Yeah,
character for
there's
like I remember him confronting the other guy about the videotape or
mm,
something, but I don't
yeah,
remember uh, anything else. I
yeah.
don't know.
Um, so of course, in the original, Matthew goes to murder her, but he can't bring himself to stab her. Does she kind of like come to as well? Does she kind of wake up a little bit, possibly?
I think so. Like I think that's what plays into his sympathies a bit. I can't remember exactly what happens, but I think that's what makes him
Hmm.
feel more guilty
Yeah.
doing it.
So he just dabs the knife in her blood, and then goes back to the other men and says, "Yeah, I did it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh, oh yeah." And here's where obviously the main difference from the original and the remake is that we kind of see the following days from Jennifer's perspective as she kind of, I mean, clearly traumatized, but kind of is trying to sort of, well, I don't know how you would move forward after an event like this. How long is supposed to take place between this until she confronts them?
It's a couple weeks.
Because some of her like her wounds and stuff do sort of clear up. Some of the bruising and cuts on her body do seem to clear
Yeah.
up.
I really like those scenes. I like where she's like in bed with like all the like ice packs and things like that. Like something about those scenes I like. Like I like that we see her perspective, like that it really follows the like logic of calling it Day of the Woman, like that this is like about her.
Mm-hmm.
Um but yeah, no, I literally wrote it down because I was like, it's been how long? They I think he says it's been a couple weeks
Mm-hmm.
because when they're like at like a little diner or something, like talking about it. Oh, it's been 2 weeks. Yeah, I wrote in all
Yeah,
caps.
just like
Been-
it's been two
because
weeks. Also, in a really busy diner, just talking about everything, like
yeah,
in
because he's
such
like, oh,
detail
by
and
now,
so loud.
but yeah, he's like, by now the body would be like this to decompose and this heat, like it's been two
Mm.
weeks. Like someone's gonna like know something's up or something. And I was like, I don't know why, but on this watch, this is the first time I ever like realized that he says it's been 2 weeks. Like,
Mm.
so she's been like just stewing in her, plot to revenge.
But I also get the sort of thought that she immediately when this happened, it's not like it came to a moment where she went, right, okay, this is what I'm gonna do. I just feel like immediately she knew what she had to do. And
Yeah.
this was all the kind of like build up towards it because she goes to church as well and asks for forgiveness for what she plans to do.
Mhm.
Um, and how do they first find out that she survived? Because that's when they beat Matthew up, isn't it? Because they say it didn't kill her.
Hmm.
Matthew's a weird looking guy, right? He every time I was looking at him, I kept thinking he looked like Mike Myers, but like playing a character. You know, in one of his awful
Yeah.
films that Mike Myers was in like
Yeah.
what's it called, the Guru, the Love Guru. That's
Yeah.
it. Just like where you can definitely see it's Mike Myers, but he's just got like a wig and some glasses on. He looked like
Yeah.
him.
It kind of reminded me of his like Austin Powers like get up because of his
Yeah,
like glasses and his little hairdo. I guess makes sense because of the time period that would be like the
yeah, yeah,
period at
definitely.
the time. But yeah, no,
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure how. Oh, that's right. She calls and asks, calls in a grocery order, doesn't she? Or yeah, I think that must be it. I can't remember exactly how it plans out, but obviously Matthew's working as well after he's been beaten up. Um, and when he realizes that she's called in a delivery, he's obviously shaken up. I guess it's not leaned into really at all in this film, but he kind of is scared to a degree where he's like, how, what the hell's going to happen? Whereas in the remake, Matthew's almost seeing her as these visions, and there's sort of
yeah.
like a supernatural edge to it.
Yeah, I don't personally like that change. Like I like that it's focused on her and
Mm-hmm.
something about like disembodying her from the revenge because even later, I think with some of the
Yeah,
other things like we don't see her. Um I guess I might have to ponder that a little bit
yeah.
further. I think
Because I
it's
guess in
that it's more of a focus on the guys. Like I guess if we're thinking about like the social context of the economic um you know issues they might be having, I don't know, like the being disenfranchised like men in like the rural south
mm-hmm.
is interesting to then kind of show what their lives are like afterwards, and the
Yeah,
dynamics between them is interesting, but the I like I obviously like Jennifer a lot as a like Avenger, and so I like focusing on her. But then I thought about the fact that when she lures Matthew in the original, she's wearing like this white robe, and it's
mm,
very like almost like I read a some analysis that like equates it to like she's become like one with the site of her trauma. Like
mm-hmm.
she is now partnered with the woods to enact revenge on the men who victimized her in those woods, which I think is kind of interesting. And the fact that she's wearing this white robe, it reminds me of something like Lady Snowblood or something, where she's almost like this,
Like
or
almost like
almost like
a
a
and
ghost in a way. Like
yeah,
she,
ghost or like an angelic figure in a way.
yeah. So I think that's an interesting thing that they kind of take and they make it
Mm,
figurative, like rather than being this like in this robe and like
mm,
the siren in the woods that's gonna lure him, that like she's like more of a actual like haunting of
yeah,
Matthew. Like
because it
he's her, he looks all creepy, like it's the ring
mm,
or something, and then like it's kind of odd in the remake, but
it is kind of odd because she kind of like starts to stalk them, doesn't she? And she's always like she's toying with them in a way as well. So it's a very, very different way of setting
I
these
kind of
initial
I
stages.
like in that way because they toyed with her so much. Like
Yeah,
she's like throwing stuff at that guy's like back porch or something, and like her flip flop or something. I don't know.
and he just comes out firing his gun.
Yeah, he's like, "We're up!" Like
Whose
it's
flip
just
flops this?
yeah,
Come back, you left it.
yeah. It's an interesting choice. I mean, I think it is cool and it has its own like has its own merit. It's not
Mm,
what I watch. I spit on your grave for, but it
yeah.
is a interesting.
So yeah, so stalking and messing with them in the original, sorry, in the remake, she steals the videotape that what's his name, Stanley, didn't burn. Um,
Mhm.
Sends the tape to Sheriff Storch's wife, which she can't play for some reason. I can't remember exactly why. Didn't she? There's a
Maybe
reason
they
she says
don't
she can't
have.
play it.
I don't think they
Don't have.
have like that type of
Oh,
camera or something that it fits in or something. I don't know. It's
yeah,
something technical like that. Like,
yeah.
but it's a man. He like he's panicking. He's like,
Oh my
did
God, he's
Chastity watch it? Like, and I'm
that's
just
the
like,
first thing you think, so isn't it? Is his daughter, because how he is viewed as this fig, like obviously his daughter sees him as like the perfect dad, worships him in a way, and the fact that there could be anything that would ever that's the thing he's scared about the most. I feel like he's not scared about, well, I'm sure he is scared about his career and his wife and everything like that, but just his relationship with his daughter, um and the
which is an
fact that
interesting thing. I think it's cool that they kind of point that out because that's often the like conversation that's had. It's like you treat women like this, but like those are like, what about your daughter? Like someone else is gonna come do that to your daughter if not
hmm,
that I think that like women should only be valued just because they're your daughter or not, but
yeah,
it's
well,
so interesting.
that was a
It's
point I was going to make
so
then. Sorry,
yeah,
carry
he's
on.
like shitting bricks because his daughter might find out he did this without ever considering that like Jennifer is someone's daughter. It's just
Hmm. But that's
hypocrisy.
it. They view her as sport. They don't view her as a human being, and that was a good point you just made then, which is often when things like this happen, sexual assaults and murders of women. There's always that conversation that this is somebody's daughter, this is somebody's mother, this is somebody's sister, but that's not the value of somebody's life based
Yeah.
on their relationship to other people. They're human beings who deserve um who don't deserve to be treated in that way. And yeah, he is shitting bricks, and I don't blame him. Um,
Yeah.
because she is bringing it all down around him. How do you feel about Jennifer in the original, kind of using her sexuality to lure these men back into these situations where they're kind of exposed and vulnerable, and then exacting her revenge? Because obviously that's, I mean, mildly used in the remake with the way she talks to like lures Matthew, but I don't think that's sexual. That was more of like a friendship thing, isn't it? But I don't know. In the remake, sorry, I keep I keep getting it the wrong way around.
Yeah.
In the original, I wasn't quite sure how I felt about her. Like even with her luring her back in with her sexuality, I still feel like it went maybe slightly too far in terms
Hmm.
of. I was like, right, do it then.
Yeah.
Now stab him. Now, what are you
Yeah.
doing? Having a bath with him? Have
Yeah.
him.
Yeah, I think obviously like it's playing on like she's making them feel so vulnerable the way she was, and like I guess
Hmm.
the way he like almost, it takes him a second to even realize what she just did to him, like like because
Yeah,
he starts I think that's like the kicker for her is that like he's so off guard that
yeah, it
she
makes
can
him feel so
get that
safe, and
closely
then
with bits. But that's the sexuality is the most one of the most debated things I see about the films or about this
yeah,
film and about rape revenge in general, because it's very along the lines of like the femme fatale
mhm,
kind of a trope, which is very much a like in like some feminist critique considered a like backlash against feminism, like that
mhm.
women are all these sirens and harlots that are gonna like these black widows that are gonna come lead you to your death. And but it's and even in like the monstrous feminine, like using psychoanalysis, which I'm not a huge
Yeah.
fan of,
So you
Freud's fear of castration, like
mhm. You were
she
talking about
specific
this on your Ginger Snaps episode actually,
yeah,
which I was listening
there's
to
this
today.
there's this specific argument she makes that which is in line with the fact that she's like a independent woman and that threatens their masculinity, and so they like do this to take their power back, but almost in a negative reading she takes the fear of being castrated by women as the exact motivator for rape, that like it's the exact threat that women pose against men that is the reason why men feel the need to
Okay.
uh dominate women this way, which is a in line with like what's happening thematically in the film with like the way they, you know, with the class, distinction and stuff like that. So it's an interesting reading. I don't particularly like care for Freudian
Yeah.
castration fear stuff, but
Yeah. It's still
because it's
interesting, isn't it?
in a way it's like victim blaming in a
Yeah.
way.
Yeah.
But and also like I think a lot of people think it's like sex or misogynistic to like think that women would use their sexuality to get revenge. Like I think it's like almost like they think it's
Yeah. I
controversial
see what
because
you
she's
mean.
like
It's like,
naked again and things like that. But I personally like there's actually a lot of discourse around the way like actual rape survivors often
okay.
engage in like as a response or a coping mechanism hypersexuality
I see.
because
I
their
see.
sexuality was taken from them, that it's a way to reclaim that
Reclaim it. Yeah.
their sexual freedom, kind of like with Crash, uh like and
Hmm.
other like things that something that caused you trauma, like if you sexualize it then it's a way for you to take control back from the thing.
Yeah.
Like James and Crash is scared to drive after his accident, but he's no longer scared to drive once he like eroticizes
Sure.
cars. So I think
Yeah.
not that I think in 1978 Meir Zarchi was like, yeah, like survive that. And this is a
I
great
mean,
representation. But I think it's very interesting that like it's so debated, but then like 40 years later, there are survivors who are like, no, I identify with Jennifer
yeah.
because
Okay.
I did things like that, like
Hmm.
engaged in hypersexuality to take back my power. And so I think it's interesting for that reason, but it's so debated. That's like
Hmm.
thing that
I think,
that's the point where people are like, no, it's misogynistic, and it's the same point where people are
yeah.
like, no, it's actually feminist, and so it's like really
I mean,
hard
that
to,
comes up a lot, doesn't it? That comes up a lot, especially like with this subgenre as well. Like, is it
yeah,
feminism? Is it misogyny? And the fact that
yeah.
those two ideas seem to be, you can sort of, it's like a double-edged sword. You can take it one way or the other. It is quite fascinating. My
Mhm.
annoyance around it wasn't necessarily about her taking back that sexuality and being like hypersexual. It was almost the fact that I just wanted these guys to get their comeuppance immediately. I hated the fact that they were immediately back in this situation where they were like, actually, someone that is I've repeatedly raped, they're so stupid to think that that person would suddenly then want
Like
to be involved with them in a different, like, it's just,
she
it feels insane.
so she so obviously was not wanting it, and then for him to like be like, yeah, I knew you wanted it all along, like it's just, and he's so clueless, like
Yeah, it's almost like they're, oh, you had a taste of it,
and
did you? And now you've come back for the rest. It's just like, that is just so
the way
far
he's like talking
from me.
about like his kid, he's like, yeah, I love my kids, and he's like talking about his wife, he's like talking about how you get like sick, you get used to your wife, and I think like that's his
Yeah.
like justification for needing to like rape her, because it's like, oh, that's my wife, like you get used to her, I need something new,
Mm,
and it's so like gross. But then he's like, can we stop talking about my kids? It's very weird, and he's so nonchalant, and
yeah.
he's just like, sitting in the bath like so
So
clueless.
so clueless, yeah. But also, like, when she does eventually sever his manhood, he says, so good it feels painful. And then
Yeah.
obviously she just gets out of, I do like the matter of fact way she kind of does it and just gets out the bath and leaves while he's
Mhm.
like bleeding out. And
Yeah, she like
it
walks
is
him
a
in.
great shot of him dead in the basement. I think that was probably the best, like, yeah,
Yeah,
it was
the like
very effective.
violence itself, like I'm like he deserved, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty horrific punishment, I guess. But I'm like, he just deserved so much more torment. But then, like when they showed that shot of him in the basement, I was like, that's so. It's like such a good
Yeah.
image. Like it's
The fact that
so
he's
like
just dumped in the basement and just sleep. Yeah.
yeah, he's almost like upside down, like on the like
Yeah.
stairs, and he's
The fact
just
that
so
he's
he's
naked
like
as well
yeah,
just discarded him.
yeah,
And the fact that he's naked and that she burns his clothes in the fireplace. Obviously, just before that, she did kill Matthew as well. And the way she does that was a bit like, I don't know. I felt I was a bit like, God, she's having. It seems like she's having a bit of difficulty there.
yeah.
It
I
felt like
was
the
like,
most haphazard way of doing it.
yeah, I could never like try to like hang someone myself. That was a very interesting
The shot of
method to
him like having his trousers down, because again, she does lure him into that situation, and um, she does like, does she just? I can't remember if I'm confusing this, the original and the remake. In which one can he not ejaculate during the attack, but then he can when he is like alone with her? I think it's this one, isn't it? I think it's
I
the original.
I think so. Yeah, I think that's why the other guy kind of like
Yeah. Oh yeah, because then she says to
so
Johnny when she's in the bath, she says she killed him, and then she says that she made him come as well. She does say that. Um, and again, he just doesn't believe it, does he? He's
yeah,
like,
it's
oh, you're so stupid. You're so
yeah,
silly.
that's you got jokes. Like
You're such a
yeah,
kook.
yeah, it's very interesting, but yeah, I love the imagery of him like hanging with his pants around his ankles,
Yeah.
like in line with the like the castration and stuff. Like I think the line that Carol Clover says in Men, Women, and Chainsaws is like, if maleness committed the crime, then maleness will suffer the punishment. And
Mhm.
it's very, yeah, it's very on the nose there, like castration and like Matthew's got his pants around his ankles. Like
Mhm.
it's very clear, that that's what crimes they are being punished for.
Yeah. So the way Jennifer does it in the remake is she just sits down Matthew next to her on the sofa, almost like she's going to accept his apology, but then she puts a noose around his neck. Well, the noose was like on her lap. How did he not notice it? Just when he sat down next to her, he went, "Oh, what's that? Got a lovely little noose there, have you?"
Yeah, I was really confused because he's not. I thought he dies, but he isn't dead because
No,
then
yeah.
at
I
the
was also
at the
confused.
end, I was like, I thought he died. Where has he been this whole time?
I strangled him just enough to make him fall asleep for the perfect amount of time, so I could get
Yeah,
everybody else.
yeah.
And so yeah,
Just like I don't know the timeline totally.
mm,
Like even if it's presented to us in that timeline, I don't know.
yeah.
But yeah, I was like,
So
wait a minute, where did he come from?
yeah, I know. I thought it was his.
Which
Initially, I thought it was his dead body. I didn't realize he was still alive.
yeah,
Um,
I love that. I mean, it's a little horrific, but it's like it's very again,
yeah,
it's another one of those things that to me that points to like torture porn because it's like a saw
yeah.
trap, like
It
that
is like a sword trap. I just kept
the
thinking, did you
actions like
keep thinking, would that even work?
yeah, yeah, I was like, I don't know about that, but
Yeah, I feel like the body would have just absorbed.
yeah, I don't think yeah, it's got a lot to
I
travel for getting to
It's
Matthew.
got a lot to travel, let alone like blow his head off. But still, awesome. Um, as awesome as it could be. So initially, what she does, so for Stanley and the other guy, not the other guy, Andy. So she
Andy,
captures him in
yeah.
a bear trap. Then she ties him to a tree. And this is good. So she puts like fish hooks in his eyelids, like gaffer tapes his head, or like duct tapes his head, sorry, to the tree. Eyelids open. I kept thinking, how have they done this? Because it looks so good.
Yeah,
It looks
it's
legit. When it's going for his eyelids, I'm like, that's real.
yeah, I and that stuff like is what grosses me out. I mean,
Yeah.
obviously I really like watching it still, but yeah, I was like, what,
Some
what is happening?
dubious, yeah, some dubious CGI crows jump onto his body. Uh, and yeah, I think I missed the fish guts bit because I was like, why would they just start pecking his eyes out? but apparently she smears him with fish guts. And the way she does it with Andy is she like, now this is quite interesting because he's like on over a bathtub, but like propped up in a way where he's kind of got to, there's like a plank of wood underneath him, but when that gets taken away, he's got to like keep himself upright, like using his abdominal strength. Otherwise, he will go. And I'm assuming some sort of chemical in the water.
Yeah, I think like some acid or
Mm.
something. I don't know. I don't know what it is exactly, but yeah, it's like some
Yeah.
chemical burn he gets.
So again, it's almost like that action is almost like, sure, she's put him in this situation, but he's essentially doing it to himself.
Yeah.
By yeah. Don't argue with me. You're doing it to yourself. Stop it. Uh, but yeah, she basically repeats all of the taunts that they were saying to her in terms of her like being a show pony and everything like that. Um, and um, the final dude is Johnny, who again, like, what does she do? She like pulls up to the gas station. He comes out thinking she's somebody else initially, doesn't he? Like he's going to use the same line on
Yeah.
her that he did
Yeah.
initially. He's like, let's see if this line works now. She hit him with a shovel. Am I imagine that? She knocks him out somehow,
I
doesn't she?
I think so. Yeah, he's not definitely not like Johnny in the original where he's just like, yeah, let's go. But so yeah, I think he
No.
like hits him with something. I don't remember
Yeah.
what.
All in broad daylight as well. Gets him into the back of the car.
Yeah, so he wakes
So
up.
they're like some sort of
Mhm.
abandoned house. He's naked and she uses pliers to pull out his teeth. Again, continuing to taunt him.
Mhm.
And then the fact that I've seen two severed penises in the last 7 days of movies is interesting. Uh,
Yeah.
and then she it's garden shears and that she uses to lop off the old fella.
Yeah. I like that he's like kind of tied up like it very much like in line with like the horse language, like pulling out his
Yeah,
teeth
yeah, of course.
made him like do that, but like also like he's kind of strung up like a pig
Mhm.
for slaughter or something like that.
Yeah,
I just yeah, but
it it
he
felt
she
a
not
lot
only
more.
castrates him, but then she puts it back in his mouth and
Oh yeah, yeah, of course. Wow. And then he does bleed out. But this is the thing. In this film, it feels a lot more satisfying in terms of what they
yeah.
receive as their punishment. Whereas in the original, it feels like just going on the tagline, right? The tagline, which is this woman just cut,
Like
chopped, broken, burned, 5 men beyond recognitions. Like she didn't really.
yeah, no.
No.
Yeah.
So not only is it Demi Moore on the poster, but the tagline is misleading also.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it's very
um
much like not what's going on in this movie.
yeah. Because I feel like the final two kills with Stanley and Andy in the original, where obviously they go to find Johnny, they take their boat to the cabin. Um she swims out to the boat, doesn't she? Pushes Stanley overboard and
Yeah.
then just drives the boat around again, like taunting them. um,
I
so she
like the
acts as
taunting,
one of them,
but I
does
was
she?
like, they deserve more than this.
Yeah, they definitely do. Yeah, it is. It almost felt this was an afterthought because it felt
Mm,
like the final kill maybe should have been Johnny, maybe should have been Matthew.
yeah,
The
I
fact that it's
agree.
these two guys who are kind of like the just those other two, obviously, who have committed crimes that are just as bad as the other two. However, I don't know. It felt like a bit
Yes,
of an
they're the
afterthought.
ones at like the gas station that are also just kind of like playing around with each other and like just
Yeah,
messing around. And Johnny's like, "What are y'all doing?"
yeah.
Like I don't know they're
Mm.
like just like trying to do stuff with the grass. I don't know. So they're just very much the like his cronies or something. They're not
Yeah,
even like.
definitely like cronies. Yeah,
"Mm,
right hand men. Just yeah, it's literally like they just got. I don't want to say coerced. That's not the right word, but they kind of just got dragged along for the ride. But yeah, still committed it. Um, yeah, so she kills one of them with an axe, plunges the axe into his back, which kills him. And yeah, the final few scenes, which include her repeating the order that one of them made during the sexual assaults, which was "suck it, bitch,"
Mhm.
which she does, and then starts the motor, disembowels him with the propeller, and then speeds away into the distance.
Mm.
Happy ending. Not really,
Yeah.
sorry. Just
The
just
end.
an ending. The end. That's obviously how that ends, and then the remake is when she sets up the saw trap with Matthew with a sack on his head in the corner, and then the sheriff who's strung up, bent over. Is it a shotgun? I think it's a shotgun, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it just aimed? Is it just aimed at his ass, or is it in
I
his
think
ass?
it's yeah, I think it is stationed there. Yeah.
Yeah. So again, wasn't stationed. It's just
Yeah. I
placed. Just
think
but again, she kind of sets it up so that they're doing it to themselves. It's not like she
mhm.
commits the act of pulling the trigger. She sort of like puts some rope on the trigger, doesn't she? And then ties it around Matthew's wrist so that when he wakes up and moves, the
Yeah.
shot fires directly up and through Sheriff Stop what's his name? Sheriff Storch's digestive tract
Yeah.
through the mouth. It's quite an interesting shot because we see like his eyes full of blood, his mouth kind of like open from the shot. I don't know how it would necessarily work.
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Not a
I'm not going
doctor,
to
so I don't know.
I'm not a doctor. I'm not going to test it in any way. But again, Jennifer, she sits outside. She doesn't witness the actual moment of murder. She just smiles when she hears the gunshot.
Yeah, I really like this death. Like I like that they're paired together because like kind of what I read from it is because they're kind of like the top and bottom of like the masculinity food chain. Like he's in power,
Okay.
he's kind of like their ringleader. And Matthew is the one who is like coerced, like goaded
Mhm.
into doing it. But they like regardless of their um the nature of their participation, the fact that they both participated kind of shows like kind of like with like men, like if you think about like that movie, like that all of the
Oh yeah,
characters
of course,
that
yeah.
he plays are different forms of
Hmm.
misogynistic men, like from
A
the nice
child.
guy microaggressions to like actually violent men. So
Yeah.
like where I would consider like Matthew and the sheriff would be like the different um characters that he's playing in Men, but like all of them are part of the same structure that causes the violence against
Hmm.
women. And so the fact that like um whether or not like they are kind of controlling each other's death is like where
Yeah.
that's that kind of connection. Um
Yeah. I see.
like
I see what
yeah,
you mean.
that's like the condemnation of all forms of,
Hmm.
you know, participation, regardless of whether or not someone else coerced you to do it. And yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think which is something I love men for doing. So I think
Yeah.
having rewatched this film after seeing Men is what
Yeah.
helped textualize why this like elaborate trap where like, but also with
Hmm.
Saw, you know, like how like your actions affect other
Yeah.
people. That's why
It just got
your trap
it
is
just got
set up.
silly after it just got
Yeah.
silly after a while in
It's,
Saw, didn't it? You you stood in front of someone in a line.
yeah.
That's it. Get yourself into a Saw trap. It
Yeah.
started off like some people actually horrible people, and then it eventually ended up just like, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, his logic is a little silly, but yeah, but the idea that like your actions affect other people and like thinking about the
Yeah.
way you're intertwined and then paired with like the different levels of misogyny and things like that. Like so with those two movies in mind, like having rewatched both of those or watching Men and rewatching Saw recently and then see rewatching I Spit on
Yeah.
Your Grave, like I was like, oh, this death is actually like kind of interesting.
There are probably more similarities to men when they've mentioned it, like especially the fact that the main character arrives somewhere and somebody immediately questions where her partner or husband is, the fact that she's alone in this sort of environment, and yeah, I
Yeah,
didn't
all
really think
these
of that,
different
but
men
there
seem
probably
to
are
take a lot of
parallels
issue with this woman just being like
just existing.
existing.
Hmm.
Yeah,
All
what
right,
to
I'm gonna
think
have to give
about
that
there.
some more thought. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so we need to rate the movies. This is just probably going to be slightly difficult to do, I think, because often I just rate a movie based on how much I enjoyed it, but I don't know
Yeah.
if that's necessarily the correct thing to do here. But of course, as you'd guess, Vanna, I will let you rate the movies first. Not because I'm just going to copy you. I'm not just going to go, oh, yeah, me too. Yeah, yeah. I was thinking that exact thing, actually. Now you've said it.
Hmm. Yeah, it's hard to think about like obviously I can pull so much from them both, which is part of how I rate like my enjoyment when it comes to films that are not like traditionally enjoyable. Um, what did I rate them when I just rewatched them on Letterboxd? I don't know. I would give maybe I Spit on Your Grave, the original.
I won't be
Like
cross-referencing them with your letterbox score. Don't worry.
I don't like
I
no in
always
fact
think that. I think if I've already rated it on Letterboxd, I don't want to say something else. Because sometimes
yeah.
I find like when you discuss a film, and obviously two films that you've been thinking about a lot and writing about, there's probably so much more to the fact based on the fact of all of those things rather than how much you enjoyed the film. Because enjoyment probably
Even
isn't the right word.
yeah, even some of the things that I think I rated the remake so much lower. There's some I don't know, there's some things about it that I really didn't like at first. I
Mhm.
think the first time I ever watched it, like decades ago, I don't even know if I finished it because I was
Okay.
just like, no, if I want to watch this. But even just talking about it now, there were a few things where I was like, actually, I before hated the like disembodiment and like this Jennifer ghost that Matthew sees, but thinking
Yeah.
about some of the things we talked about, like find all that stuff interesting. But I guess that being said, I would maybe give the original like an A minus.
Okay. Okay.
Mhm. I think I love it, but
Yeah.
there are a few things like some of the deaths could have been a little more
Mm. Yeah.
exciting, or we talked about like the guy, Johnny should have been the end, you know, but I really like it. And I would maybe give the remake a B,
Okay. Okay.
maybe B minus.
Yeah, I think that's
I
fair.
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I guess maybe I should have thought about that
Well,
beforehand
it's
a little bit more.
yeah,
It's hard to
maybe, but
rate just
sometimes
like there's so much value, I
yeah.
guess, in them,
I
which
also
a lot
find
of people
sometimes
obviously on Letterboxd would disagree with that statement.
yeah, exactly. Rat
But
Bastard
yeah.
being one of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes when you discuss these films at such a great length as well, it kind of it unlocks this next level of appreciation for them. That being said, so initially when I watched both, I was a bit like, I don't know if I can really separate them because in terms of like an exploitation film and a 70s exploitation film, I feel like I Spit on Your Grave does plenty. I wasn't necessarily satisfied, and it's not my place to be satisfied by the way these characters get their comeuppance. I completely understand that. However, I wasn't satisfied by their comeuppance. Whereas in the remake, I was a bit like, yeah, this is what they needed to get.
Yeah.
But then, do I feel like both of them are successful at saying the same thing? I mean, yes, but like in different ways, I guess. So let's
Yeah.
go for. I'm gonna rate the original. As I said, first time watch, and also um, definitely a subgenre that isn't always for me. So let's go for a B minus for the original
Mm-hmm.
and a C plus for the remake. I
Yeah.
think the second half for me is acceptable in terms of like the punishment they get, but yeah, does it is the supernatural element something that, I mean, initially I think I found it quite refreshing, like, oh, this is slightly different, but now we've discussed it, and in terms of like it's her story, the fact that she
Mm.
vanishes for a good 30 40 minutes of the movie and becomes this kind of like spectral figure, is that kind of undoing all of the work that the
Yeah,
film
it's
was
kind of
supposedly
interesting
making.
because, like, in the opposite way, Last House has Mary survive. So
Hmm.
it's like Mary is even more present than she
Yeah.
was in the original versus like now Jennifer's less present in this one. So thinking about those
Yeah.
two films side by side is kind of interesting. Like the change things they both thought to change or
Mm.
not change when they remade. Yeah.
Yeah,
No, yeah. I think yeah,
definitely.
when I initially like probably watched the remake, I definitely was like, this is like a two, or like this is not a good not a good
Yeah.
one. I'm actually surprised with the like IMDb and like Rotten Tomatoes. I think those are like surprisingly high for what I thought
Yeah.
people would be rating it.
Mm. I guess like maybe like just because it was less controversial as a film. Like obviously the 1978 one probably got bumped down a bit because of its controversy, whereas the 2010 one was like it was off the back of plenty of torture porn and exploitation films.
And
I
even
don't know.
plenty of those I feel like have like there are movies that I love from like that era and I like Google it to find out where I can watch it and it's like 9% on Rotten Tomatoes and I'm like,
Oh
like
no. Oh no.
there's so I in that way I think I was like surprised that these were would be
Oh,
rated
okay. I see what you
high
mean.
because there's some
Mm.
movies like especially when they have like box office returns like this one does where I'm like, oh, people like I either
Mm.
didn't even watch it or I don't know. So I was just
Didn't
surprised
notice.
by that. But yeah, no,
Mm.
I fluctuate. Every time I watch it, there are so many elements of specifically the remake that I would consider almost like corny because it's just
Mm.
um especially because it's after Last House was remade and after
Hmm.
like Halloween and Hills Have Eyes and all these other movies
Yeah, of
already
course.
had their remakes where I'm just like, oh, this is literally just like trying to like
Let's just remake everything.
copy the trend, which feels inauthentic. So something
Hmm.
about, I guess maybe why I rate the original so high is because like knowing,
Hmm.
I guess like because I've given so much thought to everything and given so much thought to Meir Zarchi's like intentions that it kind of
Hmm.
almost rose colors some of the like filmic of it or like or maybe even narrative or like
Hmm.
writing things where like so I may be more forgiving in hindsight whereas like with
Yeah.
the remake maybe because it's more like current I'm just like oh this is just like
Yeah.
trying to cash grab like it
Yeah. It
feels
feels very of its time, doesn't it? It hits certain beats. Does it
yeah
have like a
it's
new metal song in the credits? I can't even remember.
yeah, it's like very much along those lines. It does do some things to the story that I think fall in line with his intention. Like he was very specifically upset that the cops were questioning this woman he was trying to help, even though she had a broken jaw, and they were like, well, what happened? Like very much doing what the cop was doing to Jennifer in the remake, but she's bloodied and naked and has a broken jaw. She can't talk. She's not going to be able to answer your questions. And he was very like, that is what angered him so much that it's interesting that like the remake is what really explores the
Yeah.
role of law enforcement. But the rest of it, it's like very weird to have like this pretty package $2 million budget
Yeah.
like color grading and there's
Yeah.
like so much stuff about it that's very much just like in line with the trends. Not that that's like always bad because I love plenty of those movies, but as far as intention, where they're like, "Oh, Last House just did well,
Mm.
so someone let's do it,
Co-
let's
co-
do it," you know?
copy and paste.
Yeah.
There we
But
go.
oh well.
So yeah, well, I think we covered plenty during that. I
Yeah.
feel that feels like a mammoth episode in the best possible way. Um, two films to cover, you know. I feel like it's kind of a given that we've got to cover them in extensively. So thank you so much for joining us, Vannah. That was a
Yeah, thank you
pleasure.
for having me.
No worries at all. You'll have to join us again sometimes, maybe when Andy's available as well.
Yeah.
Maybe some sort of crossover with Tale from Two Sisters podcast.
Yeah.
Tale
That'd
of
be
Two
super
Sisters,
fun.
sorry. Or maybe we get the both of you on for a show for an episode in the future. That could be good.
Yeah.
Where can our listeners find more from you? Can they follow you on any platforms? Obviously, we'll put the links to your podcasts in the show notes as well.
Yeah. On Twitter and most everything else, like TikTok and even Letterbox and stuff like that, it's just Horror Helion. That was taken on Instagram. So on Instagram it's the Horror Helion.
Very rude.
Yeah, which that account's not even active, and I'm like, I want to try to figure out how to
Ah,
like, get
inbox them. Give it
get them.
up.
Yeah, so yeah, I do have a website where I try to like link everything together, which is thehorrorhelion.com. So
Oh
like
wow, okay.
I think the podcasts and like I have some articles I've written and even all my socials are on there. But you can find that if you just
Great.
follow me on Twitter also. I'm pretty active on Twitter.
Nice. Of course, we'll put all of those links in the show notes for anybody listening as well. So yeah, thank you very much for listening. If you enjoyed the show, become a patron over at patreon.com/horror hangout. Thanks to our patrons who include John Crinnan, Ben Scaife, Stephen Christopher, Laura Kendrick, Toby Miller, Lane Spencer, Ollie Child, Leslie Carlo, Julia Bilgren, Nick Spill, Troy Birch, Pazuzu, and Rosalind Harnias. Thanks to Taj Easton for our theme music. Thanks to Acast for hosting the show. Please consider giving us a rating or review. Head over to the Facebook group Horror Hangout Board of Advisors for more. We're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Next week's episode will be covering Fright Fest Glasgow, and we may even have some interview bonus episodes coming up as well. But yeah, thanks so much for joining us again, Vannah. It's been fun,
Yeah, thank you.
and catch up with you again very soon. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.